The Omniversal Slaughter, Anime/Multi-Crossover. Chapter 1, Prologue, 1/2. Spoken dialogue, thoughts, emphasized words or sentences, because Webnovel doesn't allow italics or bold. Jason Todd opened his eyes, expecting to see the ceiling of his safe house, but saw an endless expanse of white instead. He heard not a single sound, not even his own heartbeat. What the hell is this? His senses prickled as he went on high alert. He furrowed his eyes in confusion when he noticed he was naked and could see through his whole body as if it was made of glass. Hey, you're finally awake. He turned his head toward the voice's origin, only to be greeted by a tall, bald-headed man dressed in a simple plain white t-shirt and sweatpants. Now knowing that he wasn't the only one inside wherever this place is, he planned on walking towards the only likely lead to finding out about the situation he was in and acquiring the information. He already had some guesses, but it was best to find out from a better source, especially since he had little to no information. He already dismissed Penguin, Joker, or Black Mask as the culprits for this situation. Those guys would either hire someone to take care of the job for them or put a bounty on his head, and in the Joker's case, he would do it himself and drag him into whatever crazy plan he cooked up inside that fucked up mind of his. However, just as he was about to take his first step, his body paused mid-movement. He could still feel and move his eyes and mouth, but trying to move any other part of his body was impossible. At this moment, he knew that whoever or whatever took him to this place was not something he would normally deal with. I don't know who you are or where this is, but if you don't tell me right now, I'll make sure your mom won't recognize you after I'm done with you, he threatened. His deep and rough voice along with his murderous glare would have made any Gotham City street thug who knew him quiver in fear. Since I can't move, I might as well buy time to think of something to get me out of whatever mess this is. Chuckling, the man raised his hands. Now, hold on. There's no need for violence. Besides, you can't even move your body, and I know you're trying to buy time, but it's unnecessary. All right then, I'll bite. Jason narrowed his eyes. Tell me what's going on. We'll get to that, but first, introductions. He pointed a thumb at himself and gave Jason a friendly smile. You can call me Joe. I enjoy going on tours to every conceivable universe, he said casually. However, since you were so eager to fight me just a few seconds ago, I'm going to have to nip that in the bud right now to save both of our time. A powerful pressure suddenly bore down on Jason. His body shook and his pupils dilated. His honed instincts sent multiple warning signals to his brain, and he felt compelled to kneel before Joe. It was as if he was just an ant standing before a god, and it took all of his will to resist the pressure Joe was emanating. It felt like an eternity had passed before the pressure disappeared. Jason's chest heaved like he had just ran a marathon, and he stared at Joe with caution and apprehension. What does someone like you want with someone like me? Joe's eyes shined with mirth, along with an amused smile at Jason's blatant disrespect, even after his display of power. I'll let you guess. Surely someone trained by Batman could deduce whatever my reasons are based on previous evidence. You think I don't know you've been analyzing me since the start of our conversation? Jason narrowed his eyes in thought. Something about that smile and how he talked about Bruce tells me he also knows more than he's letting on, maybe even Bruce's real identity. No, my intuition's telling me he probably does know. He mentioned going on tours to every conceivable universe. As ridiculous as that sounds, I know there are beings out there that can do something similar. The Flash being one of them. But Joe's powerful. More powerful than anyone I've ever met. Jason thought back to the overwhelming pressure from before. No one's ever made my instincts flare up like that or create that kind of pressure. But all that doesn't explain why he came to me or why I'm here. Can't figure it out, huh? And thank you for the compliment. I rarely get them these days because of how busy I am. Joe gave him a knowing smile. Tisk, looks like you can read minds as well. Jason looked away, clicking his tongue in frustration at how he could do nothing to stop Joe from reading his mind. What the Allcast taught him didn't include how to defend his mind from telepathic monsters like the Martian Manhunter. Now I'm definitely sure he knows about Bruce's and everyone else's identities. Alright, let me give you some context. Joe held up one finger. First, you're dead, but dash. What the hell do you mean, I'm dead? Jason closed the distance between them with a glare before Joe could blink. In his outrage, he didn't notice that whatever force was holding before was now gone. How could I be dead again? Did something kill me while I slept? Was it an assassin? A whirlwind of emotions started overwhelming him. Confusion, anger, disbelief. You know, it's rude to interrupt others when they're speaking. Joe rubbed the back of his neck with an annoyed expression. As I was saying, you're dead, but you're not the only one. Just get to the damn point already. Jason clenched his fists. Your entire universe was wiped out. And just like that, the whirlwind of emotions was snuffed out in one moment, replaced by shock. His eyes widened as he tried to comprehend what Joe had just said. To summarize things for you, a rogue reality warper called the Marquis of Death has been traveling around the Omniverse, annihilating every universe he comes into contact with. Joe continued on. Your universe was one of the countless others that the Marquis of Death erased. I'm sorry to be the one to break this to you, but everyone you know and love is dead. No one escaped the Marquis of Death's slaughter, not Superman or any other powerful entity in your universe. No. This has to be a trick. Jason muttered. His universe, wiped out just like that? How do I know you're not lying? Joe looked at Jason in the eye and asked, I'm sure you know when someone is lying, and what would I gain by lying about this? Does it seem like I lied? Does it? No, it doesn't seem like he lied. You'll have to take my word for it, Jason. I have no reason to lie to you, Joe said. I'll have you know. Jason, however, ignored him, standing still with his head lowered and fists clenched as his mind processed the words Joe spoke before. Everyone he knew and loved was dead. Bruce, Alfred, Dick, Artemis, Barbara, Tim. Everyone. He grit his teeth and shut his eyes. Death is a revolving door in our business. Those were the words Jason said to Bruce when he delivered the news of his best friend's death, Roy Harper. But who would have thought everyone would die just like that? As Jason wallowed in his grief for his loved ones, Joe kept track of the Marquis of Death's trail of destruction that was continuing even at this very moment. He sensed the countless lives being taken away as each universe is wiped out of existence, one after the other. The desire to stop the Marquis sparked inside him, but Joe snuffed it out. If he stopped the Marquis, it would take quite a lot of power to accomplish, and he would have to pay a price that he wasn't willing to pay. Not now. He already paid a small price by interfering with Jason's soul. Besides, even if he couldn't stop the Marquis of Death personally, something else would take care of him soon. Cosmic Armor Superman. A sentential powered by symmetry, memories, duality, probabilities, and possibilities. A doomsday machine engineered by the monitors to defend against the ultimate evil. Capable of adapting instantly to counter any future threat. A sentinel suit designed for a single purpose, to protect all existence in the DC continuity against the ultimate enemy. It was the Marquis of Death's nearing demise. The mechanism would normally stay dormant, but the Marquis of Death's breach of Omniversal law will cause immeasurably powerful forces to activate Cosmic Armor Superman, which will destroy the Marquis. If he hadn't breached Omniversal law by destroying many DC universes and multiple other multiverse sectors that weren't of his own multiverse's origin, he would have been able to continue his rampage unimpeded. But as it stands, the empowered Cosmic Armored Superman will simply wipe him out of existence in ways no entity could detect unless they were on Joe's level. That is the consequence of his actions. Then again, the Marquis is just one of many universe destroyers, and his rampage gave me the opportunity to get a suitable candidate to do many of the tasks I can't do myself, and I get to compensate a tragic victim of circumstance in the DC multiverse. A guilty smile tugged at Joe's lips as he thought about the boxes he can finally tick off his bucket list. He always thought it would take a longer time for him to find the soul with the right parameters suitable for the world the tasks are on and his powers. It was a lucky break when he just stumbled upon the Marquis of Death's rampage and spotted one soul among the countless others that just felt different, but right. And it happened to be Jason Todd, of all people. However, the Marquis is far more powerful than he should be, and whatever caused him to stray from his intended fate is a mystery, even for me, Joe thought, brows furrowed in uncertainty. The Marquis of Death would gain mastery over time and space, as well as other powers like the creation of near-omnipotent beings, but not to this extent. There were other factors at play here that he wanted to identify, and that strange world with multiple anomalies is a key point in studying what may have caused the Marquis to gain more power than he should have. As for Jason Todd's current emotional state and mental state, he already expected him to react this way, though he felt slightly apologetic and guilty about influencing his emotions and making him believe his words without questioning them. But what else was he supposed to do when doing nothing will just cause Jason to keep doubting his words and most likely make him reluctant to accept what he was about to say? Joe could never convince him of accepting his request that way. For most of his soul powers to work, the recipient's soul needs to fulfill certain conditions. Bruce Wayne, most members of the Bat family, and a few others like Artemis, were the only people he truly cared for in life. Bruce was someone he treated as his father even if they had a rocky relationship, and the other Robins were his brothers in all but blood, even if some of them could really get on his nerves. Finding out that they were now all dead, it hurt more than what the Joker ever did to him. The only consolation he had was that their deaths were painless. Jason took deep, slow breaths and regained some composure. Knowing they're all dead still felt like his heart was being crushed, but the sting in his eyes disappeared and he could think clearly again. So if I'm dead? Jason crossed his arms, ignored the slight crack in his voice, and asked, why am I the only one here? Death was a familiar and unknown feeling to him. He had no recollection of going to hell or heaven, and neither did he go to a special place like this white room. All he knew was that after he died at the hands of the Joker, he was suddenly in the Lazarus pit, buck naked but alive. Well, Joe trailed off. After the Marquis of Death erased your universe, every soul human or alien would have been erased along with it. That means no opportunity to reincarnate or go to an afterlife, but that's where I came in. I intervened just before every soul was erased. And aside from saving some souls from your universe from non-existence, I also saved souls of other universes, but not all of them. I specialize in souls, but even I'm not capable of completely saving every soul of any universe from instant death. Joe shrugged his shoulders. Jason digested this new information. He finally got a more concrete idea of how powerful Joe was and an explanation of his current state. How powerful would you have to be to talk about saving souls from non-existence from multiple universes, like it was just a small chore? His current body was most likely his soul, which would explain why he looked like a ghost, being transparent and all that, but it didn't explain why it still felt like he had his physical body. Ah, yes. About that, Joe said, making Jason look up at him. I made it so that you would feel as if you still had your physical body because I wanted you to be as comfortable as you could be. After all, I wouldn't be much of a host if I didn't accommodate my guest. I see, Jason said as he set his arms down, narrowing his eyes at Joe. A strategy to make someone more willing to cooperate was to make them comfortable, which could include easing them through simpler topics before leading up to the main one or by having a delicious meal first before the negotiation. Of course, you could also do what Jason enjoyed doing most because of their effectiveness, violence and threats. But that usually worked on the normal thugs or the small-time villains, not on the more intelligent and powerful enemies like the Talons from the Court of Owls, unless of course your threat was severe enough to give them second thoughts of denying you what you wanted. I still don't know what you want from me, and yet, from what I can tell, you most likely want someone with my particular set of skills. Nothing else about me is special, unless you count coming back from the dead as something to note. Still, I don't know what the hell I can do at this point since I'm dead, Jason said. That is, unless you have a way to revive me. Joe smiled before tilting his head. Well, I would have called you an idiot if you didn't get that by now, but as expected of someone trained by Batman himself, you're quick on the uptake. I know you don't enjoy beating around the bush, so I'll just give it to you straight. Jason Todd, aka Red Hood, I want you to work for me. This includes your help in ridding worlds of the scum and trash you're familiar with, but is mostly about completing certain tasks I can't do myself. If you accept, you'll have my support and as much freedom as you desire, which, of course, includes your revival. But you will also be granted perks very few in the Omniverse can give you. Why me specifically? Why not Bruce or Dick? Hell, if you want someone who's good at taking people out, Roz, Slade, Cass, and Shiva are better at that, and they're also more experienced than me. Huh. Joe laughed, grinning and shaking his head in amusement. In my eyes, they're not the best ones for the job. Batman's good and you made some good points, but he doesn't have the willingness to do whatever it takes that you have, and I never liked the way he handled the Joker and the others in his rogues gallery. Nightwing, meanwhile, is also fit for the job skill-wise. But he also has a similar disposition to Batman's, so he's a no-go for me. Now Roz, Shiva, and Slade are people that check most of my requirements, but I already know how they'd handle things and what I'd have to do to convince them to accept, and I'd rather not waste time doing that. So in conclusion, you, Jason Todd, are the best candidate eligible for this request of mine. This means I'll be resurrected. Again, Jason said under his breath. But tell it to me straight. Is there a catch? If I decline, are you just gonna force me to work for you? Joe shook his head. No, there's no catch unless you count not being able to return to your original multiverse and body a catch. That means no returning to any iteration of your world. Also, I may be powerful, but even I have limits and conditions in how I can use my powers. That means I can't force you to work for me because one condition is for you to accept my request of your own free will. Declining would mean that I'd just send you to be with your loved ones. Hesitation brewed inside Jason after hearing that, but he was curious about this request. It sounded like the mercenary jobs he'd taken before when he was still alive. Jason mulled over what Joe said. What kind of scum are you talking about? Anything specific you want me to deal with? Instead of telling you, Joe paused before grinning, tilting his head slightly. I'll just show you. Jason Todd couldn't even utter a reply before Joe's hand was suddenly on his head. Jason blinked, confused by where he was now floating above. A sizable crowd of students wearing Japanese middle school uniforms was below him, and they were inside what seemed to be a school gym. There were decorations on the stage surrounding who he suspected as the principal, with a sign behind him signifying the graduation of middle school students. And yet, he couldn't hear anything. Urged by an unknown feeling, his attention was forcefully drawn to a young girl wearing thick glasses and had her hair tied into two thick braids framing her face. Jason, puzzled by this urge, furrowed his brows as he created a mental profile of her. There must be a reason Joe forced his attention on her. He observed her as she returned home and seemed to ask her mom something. Jason didn't even try reading their lips because lip reading was mostly unreliable, and in the next moment, the scene flashed and he was now floating above a classroom, watching as the girl from before was now transformed into a completely different person. She straightened her hair, put on lip gloss, took off her large glasses and wore a shorter skirt. The changes were few, but she objectively looked prettier. She socialized with her classmates, which was a stark difference from before when it seemed like she didn't even have one friend to celebrate with during graduation, and as he continued to observe the girl, he was wondering what the point of seeing all this was until she entered a convenience store and conversed with a young man who was clearly an adult. Seeing him approach her after looking at her from head to toe was already a clear warning sign for Jason, and based on the body language and expressions they both displayed during their conversation, he could see that the man was flirting with her, evidence of this being the girl blushing after receiving some compliments from him. His suspicions were confirmed when the older man convinced the girl to come with him and they entered a karaoke place together. They both sang some songs and ordered drinks. Meanwhile, the man seemed to compliment her more and more. Jason could already tell that the man was experienced. Based on what Jason had observed from before, the girl was inexperienced with social interactions, and it was the same when interacting with men. This made her an easy target for the man. Enraged, Jason could only watch with gritted teeth as the man drugged her and forced himself on her. Helpless, the girl's eyes became unfocused and her movements became sluggish, making it hard to put up any resistance. Oh, how he wished he had his pistols right now. It would take just one shot to kill this bastard. Actually, that would be too merciful. He'd torture the information on the drugs he used first before finishing him off. So this is the type of scum that Joe meant. They're not the more dangerous kind that I'm used to dealing with, but it doesn't matter. There's no need for hesitation in matters like this. I'll agree to his proposition if it means ending bastards like this and making sure others won't end up like this girl. With his decision made, Jason felt his consciousness return to his soul. He opened his eyes to see Joe standing with his arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. So, have you made your decision? Jason nodded without hesitation. You have a deal if it means I get to kill that bastard. A broad smile was plastered on Joe's face and he offered his hand, which Jason shook with no hesitation. The moment after it was done, he felt something change inside him. Excellent. The soul contract has been established. And there's no need to worry about that. You'll have your opportunity. What I just showed you is what would happen if nothing about her situation is changed. I would have made you see even worse scenarios, but since you already agreed, let's get right to it. To tell you the truth, the girl's situation in the vision you saw gets worse. Joe's brows furrowed. I won't go into the exact details, but what you just saw is mild compared to what happens to her after that. That only makes accepting Joe's request more worth it to Jason. Fortunately, Joe clapped his hands, his smile returning. You've accepted my proposition, and with my power combined with your help, we can prevent that from ever happening. But don't forget about the other stuff I'll need you to do for me. As long as they're within my capabilities, there'll be no need for you to worry, Jason said. Wait, let me ask you a question. Ask away. If you're so powerful, why can't you do it yourself? That. Joe rubbed the back of his neck with a sigh. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. Okay, to answer your question, I'm able to do it, but I would have to pay a price. Yes, entities like me are powerful, but like I said before, there are limits to what I can do. There's an unknown force that prevents beings like me from using all of our power to interfere with the events of a multiverse that isn't our original. So when I saved the souls from the marquee path of destruction, the price I paid is the inability to use some of my powers for a certain duration. For how long? 5 billion years, Joe answered depressedly. And I'm forced to experience every nanosecond. Making my perception of time faster? Nope, can't do that. Shortening the duration of the ban? Can't do that either. Jason winced. He could only imagine how painful being prevented from using your powers for billions of years is. Not even Vandal Savage or Roz lived that long, and they were the oldest living humans he knew about. Damn, sorry about that? No, it's fine. It's not your fault, Joe said, waving away his apology. It was my decision, so I have to live with the consequences. Do you have more questions? No, I think I'm good now. Jason brushed his hair back. How am I going to do this? It's simple. Find her, and ensure that she absolutely does nothing idiotic like trusting a stranger she just met. Of course, it won't always be that easy with future tasks, but you'll have my help, and that's basically a guarantee. Joe explained, giving Jason a thumbs up and a bright, shiny smile. Saki Yashida, huh? Alright, I won't forget her name. Jason narrowed his eyes. I won't forget that piece of shit's face either. Now, before we begin, do you have questions? Asked Joe. Jason nodded and asked, can we get started already? Joe's grin reached his ears. Thought you'd never ask. Joe stretched his back and cracked his knuckles. Now it's been a while since I last did this, so it might be a little painful at first. I apologize in advance. What do you m-dash? Before he could finish, Jason dropped to his knees, hunched over with his jaw and fists clenched. Unimaginable pain coursed through his whole body for what felt like an eternity before his eyes closed. His consciousness left him as he fell to his side, and a soft blue glow emanated from his body. The light intensified before it became an azure cocoon that wrapped around Jason. Huh. Where am I? It feels warm. Familiar. But it feels like my thoughts aren't coming together fast enough, as if my mind is moving through mud. Jason. It's me, a familiar voice suddenly echoed. That voice. Bruce? Is that you? Yes. I only have this one opportunity to leave you a message before you go. So please, let me talk first, Bruce said, his voice tinged with urgency. Okay. Am I going somewhere? Jason. You and I haven't had the best relationship. You have a talent for making understatements, Bruce. And I know I haven't apologized enough for letting you down. Bruce paused for a moment. I'm sorry, Jason. I should have been there for you. Protected you? I thought we were over that. I wish I had the same thoughts. But I always regretted not being able to save you, to be there with you when you needed me the most. I should have been a better Batman. A better father to you? I forgive you. But I'm sorry too. For so many things. Thank you, Jason. I failed you before, but that's why I'm here. Jason heard the sudden lightness of tone and wondered where the sudden optimism came from. So that we could help you one last time. What are you talking about? Don't make the mistake I made, Jason. Don't get hung up on the deaths of your loved ones and live your life. Bruce. Don't forget that I'll always believe in you. No. Goodbye, son. Bruce. Chapter 2, Prologue, 2 halves. Jason's consciousness returned with a gasp, and his torso expanded with a lungful of air. His body laid on the floor, facing the crescent moon on what felt like concrete pavement. For a moment, it was as if his honed senses were enhanced even more. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he could see with newfound clarity. An array of pungent odors filled his nose, and his head throbbed from all the cacophony of loud noises in the area. As soon as all this happened, his training and instincts kicked in, and Jason took a deep, but controlled, breath of air. His focus concentrated on dialing his senses back. Moments later, his enhanced senses were dialed back to a bearable threshold faster than he expected, but he was just thankful for the fact that the bombardment of sensations wasn't as severe as before. Jason groaned, marveling at how light his body felt and how easy it was to move as he stood up and assessed his situation. He didn't remember putting on any clothes, but he was dressed in a comfy black hoodie with gray pants and black sneakers. Looking around, he was in what looked to be a wide but empty alley next to a road. He noticed a sign and looked up, expecting to see English words, but found Japanese characters instead. Japanese? Am I still in Crime Alley? Wait, I remember now. Jason thumbed his chin in thought, recalling what had happened in that white space. Waking up only to find out he was dead again, and that the universe and everyone in it was erased by a madman on a multiverse-spanning rampage, was an enormous shock to his system. But the hardest pill to swallow was the deaths of everyone else he cared for. Jason shook those thoughts out of his mind for now. Where is that guy? Is he just gonna leave me here or? I'm right. Jason abruptly twisted his body and launched a swift kick behind him in less than a second. An audible thud was heard as the force of his kick generated a slight gust of wind. Here. Joe trailed off and whistled. Damn, nice reflexes. Jason glared at Joe, who easily caught his kick with one hand and gave him a wide smile. His senses not picking Joe up unnerved him. How the hell did you get behind me? I'm not a ninja like you, but I'm just as good at getting behind someone and hiding my presence. Joe let go of Jason's leg and clapped his hands. So, how do you feel? Do you feel any physical or mental changes in your body? Jason furrowed his brows. Now that you mention it, my body feels lighter and a lot easier to move, and a while ago. Wait a minute. When he returned to consciousness, his senses were so sensitive to everything around him, he had to adapt to the change. But something else baffled him. Many years of training and experience fighting a variety of foes developed and improved his instincts and intuition, like a sixth sense that has helped him avoid attacks outside his perception, as well as letting him know if someone was following him. However, that was not the extent of what he sensed earlier. It was as if he could perceive everything around him to a certain extent. A few meters behind him was a trash bin, and close to it was a parked bike. He could tell where the flies were without even looking at them as they zigzagged through the air. If he had a pebble, he was confident he could hit every one of them as long as they were within a certain distance, because it seemed that the sphere of what he could sense was limited to only around a meter around him. He narrowed his eyes at Joe and asked, "What did you do to me?" Joe shrugged his shoulders. "I just gave you my help in the form of a power-up, with some additional support from Batman and a few other people you know. A little soul tweaking here, a bit of soul merging there. It was the least I could do for you since accepted my request." Jason rubbed the bridge of his nose and breathed out an exasperated sigh. "I clearly remember talking to Bruce in my head. He mentioned something about them helping me. Based on this soul stuff you did and from what Batman said. Did you mess with our souls by mixing them up or something like that? It's slightly more complicated than that. Think of their qualities, skills, powers, memories, and experience as information or data embedded into their souls. I merely copied most of that information and pasted it onto yours, giving it more complexity and power. A lot of benefits are included in this. The accumulation of compatible information causing qualitative evolutions in your mind, body, and soul being one of them, but you'll figure out more on your own in the future. Now, before you say anything, no, I can't undo what has been done. Trust me, you do not want to experience what that would do to your soul," Joe said, leaving no room for negotiation. "Thank you so much for asking for my consent before fucking with my soul," Jason said, with heavy sarcasm dripping from his voice. Joe raised his eyebrow. "Let me ask you this, then. Would you try stopping a decision Batman himself supported?" Jason was taken aback by the statement, his eyes widening in surprise. Bruce was never a fan of acquiring power for the sake of having power. He studied and perfected all the skills to become Batman and protect Gotham and its citizens. So having Bruce agree to something that would give him the only other person in the Bat family who isn't reluctant to kill aside from Damian powers that would only help him become more deadly and efficient was an astonishing idea. Joe chuckled to himself as he replied, "Didn't think so. Fine. You made your point. You said multiple beings. Can you at least tell me whose souls you merged with mine, aside from his?" Joe looked at his lifted hand and began raising his fingers as he cited each name. Dick Grayson, Cassandra Cain, Damian Wayne, Tim Drake, a composite version of Slade Wilson. He raised his other hand, and two other versions of you, each from different universes. He flipped hands, his palms facing Jason. Adding Batman, it's 8 in total. There are some likely side effects to this, but aside from some of your other selves' memories leaking, everything else is relatively minor. Did I hear you correctly? Are you saying that you merged my soul with almost everyone working with Bruce, the damn Deathstroke, and two other versions of me from other universes? Having the skills, powers, and experience of every person he mentioned would certainly benefit him tremendously. In fact, he could say that if he does now have all that, not a single one of them would be able to match him in single combat. Most likely not even Batman, Lady Shiva, or Richard Dragon. However, this was becoming a bit too much for Jason to handle. He could understand merging his soul with other versions of him, and was only slightly uncomfortable with the fact that his soul is merged with people he knew or was close to, but merging his soul with Slade Wilson, of all people, was just ridiculous. And what the hell does he mean by composite? Yes, you heard correctly, Joe said with an amused smile. Joe was enjoying breaking his normal perception of reality, and it was starting to annoy him. Jason only had one question. Why? I could have done my job without the power-up. In response, Joe raised an eyebrow, clapping his hands together before separating them. From the space between his hands, a holographic projection expanded and split into 3 screens, displaying high-quality images of varying sights. On the left screen, monsters resembling goblins, ogres, and kobolds wreaked havoc on a village. On the middle screen, a woman with a porcelain complexion and black hair tied in a bun, dressed in a long black kimono, had her blood-red eyes fixated on a group of 5 people who were kneeling with their foreheads touching their hands. Finally, on the right screen, the image of a blue-haired woman with a red tattoo above her chest wearing a white military dress wielding a sword was displayed with a backdrop of bloody corpses filling the image. Her face had a contemptuous grin, and Jason got a perfect view of the gruesome scene. In the future, you will face enemies you could never touch if I don't give you something to power you up. Especially the 2 women. As you are now, you wouldn't even last 3 seconds against either of them. Granted, you might be more skilled than them, but their physical capabilities far surpass yours, Joe finished, putting down his hands and letting the projection fade into motes of light that disappeared a moment later. Jason's brows furrowed as he delved into his thoughts, but he already signed up for this, so there was no taking back his actions now. He questioned himself, pondering how much strength he would have to attain to be their match. In his last life, he was practically in the top 0.0000001% of normal, unpowered humans in terms of strength and skill, but he wouldn't even last a second against the 2, even with the upgrades Joe gave. That was a difficult thought to comprehend. But if what Joe said was right, they're most likely on the level of meta-humans or far above it. A bright glow that illuminated the alley then caught his attention. A ball of light floated above Joe's finger. Its appearance reminded him of a blue sun, but if he focused his vision, the sun was actually lines of numbers and symbols he couldn't understand in the shape of a sphere. What are you doing? Asked Jason. You remember why we're here, right? You have 4 weeks to intervene and stop Saki Yashida from her fate. That's your main goal for now, Joe said, maintaining his concentration on the sphere that slowly grew brighter until Jason was forced to look away. Now this is what will allow you to stay connected to me, and I'll be able to send you messages through it. I won't be able to stay here since I have other things to do, but as long as you have this, just call my name and I'll answer if I can. So if you need any help at all, I'll be able to answer your calls. Jason supposed that would be a good idea, though he doubted he would need Joe's help in taking out 2-bit criminals. The sphere was now so bright that it forced Jason to close his eyes. Moments later, a strange whirring sound entered his ears, reminiscent of alien technology charging up. He slowly opened his eyes, only to find Joe gone. In his place was a floating ring and a piece of paper. He grabbed both. Unfolding the paper revealed a letter which Jason started reading. I apologize for the sudden exit, but there's something urgent that needs my attention. This enchanted ring contains your gear and other things I thought you might want. You can store and take things out of it, and you don't have to worry about storage as long as what you want to store isn't anything bigger than a truck. As soon as you wear the ring, it will turn invisible, making it an easily concealable storage device. To use it, just concentrate on the ring, and your mind will intuitively know the ring's contents. After that, simply think of what you want to retrieve, and will it to appear. Easy enough, right? Your benefactor, Joe the Baldmighty. Yes, this is my official title. Jason chuckled before stopping as the paper in his hand suddenly glowed and changed in shape. His eyebrow rose in curiosity, which turned into surprise as the paper finished changing and turned into a photo. It was a selfie of the whole Bat family, in their suits, with the familiar background being the endless expanse of white from before. Dick was seemingly the one who held the camera at a high angle with that same bright grin he always has on his face while holding an annoyed Damien by the shoulder. That gave him another chuckle. To the right were Tim, Barbara, and Cass, who all smiled at the camera while Duke and Stephanie both gave a thumbs up. He wasn't very close with Duke and Stephanie, but he appreciated their effort. At the very back was Bruce, giving the most genuine smile Jason's ever seen from him. He flipped the photo to see if there was anything there. He was right. On it was a sentence written in Bruce's handwriting. We'll always be with you, no matter what. Bruce's voice lingered in his mind, echoing in his thoughts. Emotions that he had always tried to ignore rushed to the forefront. His eyes welled up. Fucking damn it. He quickly dried his eyes with his forearm. Those assholes are making me miss them already. Despite his words, a fond smile was on his face as he looked at the photo. He now had something to remember them by, which filled him with great relief. He turned his attention towards the plain silver ring. Remembering the letter's contents, he slowly put it on his middle finger and watched with fascination as it turned invisible. He was curious about how it worked, and based on what Joe said about it being an enchanted ring, it could be working through magic. But he put his curiosity aside for now. It only took a moment of concentration for him to connect with the ring, and everything clicked inside his mind. Everything important he had before he died was inside the ring. His domino mask and face mask, his weapons and ammo, his normal clothes and suits, a grappling hook, technology he developed himself and some by Wayne Enterprises, everything. Even duplicates of his Red Hood helmet. Jason wanted to know how the ring worked out of pure curiosity, but he suppressed it for now. Jason willed a phone out, and it appeared out of thin air into his open hand, his brows rising in surprise. Now he really wanted to know how the ring worked. He got a feel of the phone's sturdy make and made sure it functioned properly before returning it inside the ring, and the phone disappeared from his hand. He didn't have his database or other forms of accessing information in this world, but he could just hack into whatever military or government networks he can find. Looks like everything is in order, Jason said before taking one last look at the photo and storing it in the ring. He stepped out of the alley, brought his hood up, and walked along the sidewalk. Cars filed past as he formed his plan. There was no time to lose. Chapter 3, System Activation. Jason hummed a pleasing jazz tune as he casually walked away from a few ATMs, his hood covering his face. For some reason, he was so hungry that after 5 minutes, his stomach grumbled during his walk, so he thought he could buy some food first before he went on his crusade. It was only then that he realized he was broke. Joe didn't give him any of his stored cash from his past life for an unknown reason, but then again, would the money he had even been legal in this world? Probably not, but he could do a lot with all that money, and as far as he knew, no one would be able to track it. Now, a normal person would have thought of getting a job or borrowing money from someone they knew, but he was far from normal. So with his technological expertise and sheer skill in hacking that could get him into the most advanced and secure corporate networks like LexCorp, and using the Wayne tech he had in the ring, getting into the bank's network and making the ATM spew money out was a cinch. Disabling the security systems, which included the security cameras in the area, barely slowed him down by a few seconds. Minutes later, he was more than $500,000 yen richer, which was about $3,700 if converted. He could have gotten more, but for now, this was enough. Carrying that much money on his body would have been rather difficult, even with pockets, but the ring saved him the hassle of all that. Let's see. Jason's phone illuminated his face as searched for the nearest place he could get food on his phone. There's a convenience store that's only around 15 minutes away from here. Having memorized the path towards the convenience store with one look, he stored the phone in the ring and started taking the fastest route, continuing his humming as he does so. Compared to Gotham City, Tokyo seemed to be an overall better city to live in based on what he'd seen so far. Jason's eyes swept around the area as he walked. I would definitely prefer living here. Air's clean, crime isn't as bad, and they have good sushi. But Gotham has its own attractiveness to it. Its streets were much safer and enjoyable to travel on. They even had backstreets between houses that were specifically made for people and two-wheeled modes of transport, something Gotham City lacked in most areas. But then again, Gotham City and Tokyo were both completely different in culture and architecture. The street lamps shone brightly, illuminating the streets with a warm yellow glow. The buildings weren't as towering as Gotham's, allowing the tranquil moonlight to blanket the city. Instead of the acrid smell of trash and dried blood, each breath he took was filled with the crisp, clean scent of fresh air. The streets were almost free of any debris or garbage, and the bins were all in good condition, not blown over by the wind or people. With his enhanced senses, the experience was much better, letting him immerse himself in the city's pleasant atmosphere as long as he could. What was strange was that it wasn't his first time in Japan, was it? This was surely the side effect Joe talked about. He had memories of being in Japan, but he knew he had never been to the country. Busy as he was with his all-cast training and business in Gotham City, he almost never had time to go to other countries. Yet memories of traveling the world, learning and becoming an expert in multiple skills and mastering martial arts of every kind were vivid inside his mind. The sets of memories weren't complete, though. There were gaps between them. The biggest ones in particular were the gaps between being Robin and their revival. A gap he couldn't fill in no matter how hard he tried, and he suspected it was most likely memories of his other self's time with the Joker, including his death. There was no other possibility in his mind. It seemed like he was stupid enough to try killing the Joker alone in other universes, too. One set of memories was of him being trained by the Deathstroke of all people and setting up a top-tier mercenary organization. It seemed his other self trained just as hard as him to accomplish his goals, whatever they were. Those goals likely involved killing the Joker, but you never know. It was a different him, so maybe it was also someone else who caused the majority of his other self's anger and pain. For a moment, Batman popped up into mind. He shook his head at the thought, but it was possible. His other version's memories were of traveling the world, following Bruce's footsteps, learning from the same teachers, just to make sure he was prepared for his eventual confrontation with Bruce. Jason's thoughts traced back to the photograph. Bruce's smile specifically. It was a genuine smile from Bruce, and that look in his eyes. It was as if he was proud. No, maybe, understanding? Batman never agreed with his methods, even forcing him to resort to non-lethal methods whenever he operated in Gotham. But maybe, just maybe, he knew that doing things his way, sticking to his code, wouldn't always work out for everyone's best interest. That maybe Red Hood could serve justice differently. Not necessarily by killing criminals, but Red Hood crossed lines Batman never would. And sometimes, lines needed to be crossed, no matter how many people denied it. Jason always argued that monsters like the Joker should not be allowed to live, knowing that they would cause death and chaos with no remorse. But killing a criminal was too much for Bruce. He could imagine the look Bruce would give him if he even suggested or hinted it. But Batman should have already killed him years ago, when he lost a son to the Joker. Jason Todd, the Robin who was always overshadowed by his predecessor, who was determined to make a name for himself, and who did his best to prove himself to Batman. And yet, he suffered a tragic death at the hands of the Joker. To this day, the Joker's cruelty still haunts him in his nightmares, and the pain and suffering he endured still lingers in his memory. He, ha 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 ha. Jason shook his head, calming himself down with a deep breath as flashbacks of his time with the Joker and that awful laugh of his echoed inside his mind. He'd rather stay far away from those memories. They brought too much pain, too much anger, and those weren't what he needed right now. He glanced down as his stomach growled, bringing him out of his musing. Right. Food was the current #1 priority. With a sigh, he continued his journey, silently making his way through the cold streets of Tokyo. Jason reached the convenience store minutes later at an intersection. Its automatic glass doors slid back with a ding. Entering, Jason pulled down his hood and brushed back his bangs. "Welcome to our store," said the cashier, trailing off as soon as her eyes locked on Jason. He glanced curiously at the store's female cashier. The cashier, a young, black-haired girl dressed in a white and green striped top and abnormally short skirt, seemed to be in a daze as she looked at Jason. It was a look most people would imagine being on someone falling in love at first sight. Why the hell is she looking at me like that? His appearance wasn't bad per se, but he didn't think he was good-looking enough to have a girl fall for him with one look. Curiously, he looked at his reflection in the store's glass, and his eyebrows rose in surprise. What did Joe do to my damn face? Clear skin which was free of any blemishes or scars from past battles, and his previously dull blue eyes were now a deep shade of blue that had a vibrant shine to them. Aside from those, the shape of his nose, the depth of his eyes, and his jawline all changed. Even his general facial structure transformed to be perfectly symmetrical. However, most of his attention was mainly on the resemblance he had to Dick and Bruce. It was as if his face was the perfect meld of all three of their features. Also, was it just him, or did he look taller? Jason tilted his face at multiple angles, scrutinizing every detail he could. Did that guy do this on purpose just to fuck with me, or is it because of all that soul-merging stuff that I now look like this? He did not like the prospect of seeing something resembling Bruce or Dick's face every time he looked in the mirror, but it seemed like he had no choice but to live with it from now on. Do you need help with anything, sir?" The cashier stuttered. She seemed to only now realize that she was staring at a customer. Jason stopped what he was doing and looked back at the girl, who now had a growing blush on her face. "It's nothing. Just wanted to see if I had anything on my face. You were staring at me for quite a while." Oh, she bowed. I am sorry for bothering you. Please excuse me." As she straightened, she locked eyes with him for less than a second before looking away, hands and legs fidgeting. "There's no need to apologize." Jason shook his head. Slightly timid, easily flustered by a handsome face, and doesn't seem to have any combat training or experience. His brows furrowed. Wait, where did that come from? As far as he knew, he wasn't so cautious as to create a mental profile of a convenience store employee. Most of the people he knew who would do that would be Bruce and everyone he trained. But still, if I turn into Bruce, I'm giving Joe a piece of my mind and maybe a bullet or two, or three. Jason gave what he hoped to be a disarming smile. "If you'll excuse me, I need to make sure my stomach doesn't eat itself." She seemed to fall into a daze again before she shook her head. "All right. If you need anything, please tell me, and I'll do my best to help." Jason responded with a nod, grabbing a basket while doing so. As he browsed the aisles, it didn't escape his notice that the girl's orange eyes followed him while he roamed the store, barely taking them off for a second before returning. He threw the food and drinks in the basket, which were mostly food bars and water bottles, and reassessed his plan and the information he got from Joe, all while ignoring the cashier staring at him. Joe told him he had 4 weeks to save Saki Yashida, but he doubted he would need an entire hour to know where to find her. If Japan's government stored their citizens' private information on the internet, which is unlikely, accessing the government's database should give him her whereabouts and anything else he would need to know. After that, it's just a matter of monitoring her, scouting the locations she frequents and making sure that she isn't tricked by the man in the store to come with him. So why give him 4 weeks? The reason could simply be just to give him more time to prepare, but his intuition was telling him that there was another purpose for the extra time given to him. But what was it? As he mulled over his thoughts, he overheard the cashier he met and another employee's conversation. "Yui, have you seen that creepy old man anywhere?" the other employee asked. Jason felt Yui take her eyes off of him. Oh, hey Shi-chan. I think he went to the bathroom. Damn it. Just as I needed to ask that useless uncle something. She paused for a moment. "You okay, Yui? What are you looking at? Oh wow." A strange atmosphere covered the store as the two employees stared at him with red faces and fidgeting limbs while he pretended not to notice and continued to browse the food items. While he was here, he might as well get a face mask that wouldn't seem out of place. That should solve his face issue. The ones he currently had were for his outings at night. Hey, who is that really hot and tall guy Jin? Is he a supermodel? Shi-chan whispered, but with his senses, he still heard her words loud and clear. He's totes the hottest guy I've ever seen in my life. I don't know, but don't stare at him, it's rude. Yui whispered back. What? You hypocrite? Why are you telling me that when you were doing it first? Finished placing items in his basket and having heard enough from them, Jason started heading towards the cashier with a 10,000 yen bill in hand. Both girls quickly stopped talking and did a poor job of pretending to be busy doing work. Did they think they were being quiet at the end of their conversation? He could tell his senses were many times better than an average human's now, but even a normal person paying attention would just need to strain their ears to hear a conversation that loud. Jason placed his basket on the counter, both girls straining their necks as they looked up at him. This'll be all. Can you put all this in a plastic bag if you have one? Both girls nodded before their eyes widened when they realized the number of food bars and water bottles that were in the basket. They stared at each other with strange looks. He contemplated telling them he was a bodybuilder going on a specific diet, but he settled on staying quiet. That usually worked better. Finally, Yui started scanning each item and handed them over to Shi-chan, who placed them in plastic bags. In the end, 2 large plastic bags were bulging with food bars and water bottles. Yui looked up at Jason with a customer-friendly smile, the prominent blush on her face ever present. That'll be 5,780 yen. Suddenly, the sound of a thud followed by a curse and footsteps coming from the bathroom entered his ears. Jason took note of it and handed over his 10,000 yen bill, and as Yui counted the change, he noticed Shi-san kept glancing at him with a red face. He kept his face neutral as a sudden realization hit him. Wait a minute, what the hell is Japan feeding these teenagers for them to have breasts that big? Before Jason could speculate further, Yui finished and handed the change to him. Here is your change, sir. Jason accepted the money, covered the change in his hand, and pretended to put it in his hoodie's pocket when he instead put it in the ring. The doors of the bathroom swung open. An old and obese Japanese man wearing the store's uniform went behind the counter. Hey girls, I think the toilet supplies need to be restocked soon. Could either of you be the one to do that? As he talked, his eyes discreetly ogled both of their figures, focusing on their chest before lowering to their thighs. Shi-san seemed to notice as she uncomfortably turned her body away from him and crossed her arms in front of her chest with a disgusted expression on her face. Yui was the only one who didn't seem to notice because of reasons Jason couldn't fathom the man's actions as she kept her smile while she answered him. Jason's cold eyes slightly narrowed at the man before a red holographic screen suddenly appeared in his vision, surprising him. All conditions have been fulfilled. A robotic yet surprisingly human male voice echoed inside his mind, speaking in an English West Country accent. System activation process commenced. What the hell? System activation process completed. Hello? Is this working? Can you hear me? What's going on? Hang on, let me see if I can fix this. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Jason internally groaned. == Author's note, if you can figure out the name of the system based on certain direct and indirect clues I've given before reading the next chapter or reading the comments, you're a chat gamer. Also, you could call it a system, but that's pretty much what you can call any AI like support or power in web novels. I'm just calling it a system for convenience's sake. As I said in the last sentence, it is a form of support for Jason's future missions and none of those included having punishing and ridiculous quests or absurd gacha roles that will give the main character overpowered items or abilities just because I want it to. I have another plan for that kind of fanfic. If you're curious about what the system is for and what its features are, why don't you add my story to your library and donate a power stone or 2? Think of it as an investment for your future entertainment and reading experience on this platform. Definitions. Gaijin, in Japan, a foreigner. Sauce for the characters, JK to Ero Konbini Tenku Chapter 4, Wheatley. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Jason internally groaned. Oh, so you can hear me? Brilliant. I thought we were having some technical issues there, replied the voice inside his head. What is this? A surprise from Joe? An artificial intelligence attached to my soul? As if. He internally scoffed at his last guess. I'm a bit insulted that you would call me something as mundane as artificial intelligence. But then again, Joe did call me a repurposed system AI, and I was just a robot aimlessly floating in space before Joe found me. Both prove your point, but never mind that. Let me introduce myself. I'll be your new Solma. Wait a minute, that sounds wrong. I'll just skip to the introductions, I guess. He cleared his throat. My name is Wheatley. Pleasure to meet you, Jason. The pleasure is all mine. Jason replied. Yes. Now that the introductions are done, let me give you a bit of a rundown of why I'm here. Wheatley said. I'm another form of support Joe has given you. I have a lot of convenient functions that'll assist your fight against crime and Joe's assignments, so think of me as a permanent brain buddy. By the way, you don't have to hide your thoughts from me. As long as it isn't intended as a message for me, I won't be able to receive it. That's good to know. A brain buddy, huh? He pondered, his cold eyes continuing to observe the old man in front of him. Joe's work drastically improved not only his physical aspects, but his cognitive capabilities as well, and it was strange the way he could have a full-on mental conversation in a fraction of a moment, his thoughts being so quick in real time. He should have expected that when Joe mentioned having Deathstroke's data pasted onto him. That man's enhanced brain operated at peak efficiency, at least 9 times beyond that of a normal man, and let him have control over every molecule in his body. Yet, Jason didn't feel like he had that level of control. Yes, he could definitely feel that he had more control over his body than before, but not to the extent Deathstroke achieved. Perhaps the changes caused by the power-up need more time to take effect. Can you tell me what made you activate? Why, yes, I can. There is one primary cause. The cause being the people currently around you. You see, in the world you are in as of this moment, and especially the country you're in, strange situations or things that shouldn't exist somehow do exist. Joe calls these things anomalies. They are abnormal changes in the world's fabric of reality and strings of fate, or is a product of one, like your universe's sudden death, for example. At least, that's what Joe told me. Some are positive anomalies, ones that help in some way if you look at it from a certain perspective, but most of them are quite bad. Like really, really bad. The people around you are part of a bad anomaly's effects on this country, and because of your close approximation with them before the main sequence began, the prerequisite Joe set for my activation was fulfilled. Basically, we work together to find and investigate these anomalies, and if they're terrible for the world and humans in general, we eliminate them, or try to. Wheatley explained. Who? Sorry for the long explanation there. Joe told me he'd upgrade me so that I can actually help you, and it seems like he really did because I was using a couple of words I had never used before. I didn't even know they existed. How will you help me find and solve these anomalies like the one these people are in? It's actually pretty simple. In this case, we just need to take out that fat human over there. Don't worry, killing him has a purpose, and his soul won't go to waste. I'll extract his essence and use it to track and isolate the source of the anomaly. That way, we'll be able to stop anything similar from happening in the future because the anomaly wouldn't exist anymore. That's it? Alright. Easier than he thought it would be. Actually, forget what I said. I just remembered what Joe told me, and he said that this anomaly in particular has existed in this version of Earth for thousands of years. Basically, what I'm saying is, it might take a while before I'll be able to track the source. And by that, I mean you might need to kill a lot more people like him. That's how I'm able to take their souls for analysis, by the way. Though I'm sure killing a couple dozen humans wouldn't be a problem for you, Mr. Red Hood. I have no problems with that. In fact, I look forward to it. As long as it's for a good enough reason. But tell me what anomaly these people are involved in first. Just saying that it's a bad anomaly doesn't really give me a good idea of what I'm dealing with here. You are absolutely right. Well, to summarize things, fat human over there does the deed with the 2 female humans using unethical methods, and they enter a state of, what was it again? Oh right. Stockholm Syndrome. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But it's Stockholm Syndrome on steroids. In fact, according to my data, it happens quite quickly in almost every similar situation in Japan. That isn't supposed to happen, right? Or am I just completely wrong about this? No, you're right. Jason's jaw clenched. That definitely shouldn't happen. From how the blonde girl commented on the old man earlier, it sounded like she knew him personally, or at least well and long enough to know that he's not someone you shouldn't be anywhere near of. Maybe he's someone related to her or someone she met through her friend. She also could have just worked here long enough to know how much of a deviant he is. So, now that the debriefing is done, what's your plan, Jason? I'll need to collect more information and evidence to see if he really is someone I should dispose of. He grabbed the 2 large plastic bags filled with food and water. The mental conversation felt like they've been talking for a minute or two, but it only lasted for about 10 seconds in real time. The 3 were still locked in the conversation with Yui, now trying to pacify the disgusted blonde girl while the old man continues ogling the 2 of them discreetly. Jason swiftly produced a small and attachable listening device from his ring, placing it under the edge of the counter. Jason cleared his throat loudly, interrupting their conversation, causing the 2 girls behind the counter to swivel their heads in his direction and the old man to jump in fright. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, but can you point me to where the bathroom is? After the old man used it, he already knew where it was located based on the sound. He just needed to listen to them through the listening device and inspect the bathroom. He had a strong hunch that the loud thud from before the old man exited the bathroom wasn't because he slipped and fell. Oh, Yui pointed behind him and to his left. The bathroom is in that direction, just past the potato chips and the candy. Thanks. Jason nodded and headed for the bathroom. Strange. Earlier, why did the old man jump as if a ghost spooked him when he cleared his throat? Did he not see him? Maybe he's blind or just has poor spatial awareness. You never know when it comes to humans and their faulty, fleshy bodies. And I don't mean to offend you, by the way. Since you're, none taken? Jason shook his head and entered the bathroom, grimacing because of the bathroom's stench. It hadn't been cleaned yet and he could already smell the bathroom from outside, but it was much worse after getting in. Especially with an enhanced sense of smell. Ignoring the smell, he produced an earpiece from his ring and fitted in his ear. The audio from the listening device was crystal clear. Swear he wasn't there before. It was as if a ghost had just popped up from nowhere, the old man said. Jason inspected the bathroom. It was a small, cream-colored space with white tiles, a single mirror and faucet. The toilet was a little farther back, past the faucet. Jason pushed its door open. What are you talking about? He was there the whole time. Are you sure you don't need to get your eyes checked, old man? The blonde girl asked. Jason looked up, searching for an irregular object attached to the high ceiling or somewhere on the upper wall. One would think something on the ceiling would be easy to spot, but people rarely look up, especially in bathrooms. He immediately spotted a small box of a similar color with the walls, about an inch in size, and the reflection from its lens was as clear as day to his eyes. It was directly above the toilet, taped to the ceiling. People using the toilet wouldn't notice it unless they directly looked up. I'm serious? I wouldn't miss a customer that noticeable, but I literally didn't notice him before he made a sound. Maybe you're so sneaky that he subconsciously ignored your presence. That's not how stealth works. Well, maybe you were just distracted? You have been more tired lately, Yui suggested. With a slight crouch, Jason leapt many feet off the ground, plucked the camera from the ceiling, and landed back without making a single sound throughout the process. Identifying the camera as a wireless one designed to deliver live feed to a device, he placed it in his hoodie's pocket and took out a tablet from the ring with the Wayne logo on it. He traced the camera's signal back to the receiving device and hacked into it, using the signal emitted by the camera as a pathway into the main device. With it connected, the tablet now listed every other camera connected to the device the old man was using to look at the camera feeds, with multiple of them having different angles of what seemed to be the staff locker room for females. Maybe? I don't know anymore. I think I should ask for a day off from the manager, the old man stuttered. Jason guessed that the old man was using this as an excuse to take a day off. He sounded a bit too relieved when he said that. That was fine with Jason, though. Better for him to stay away and stop spying on the girls or anyone else. The cameras were clearly well made. However, their signals were only effective at a certain distance of around 55 meters, barely enough to cover the area needed for half of the store. But that could mean he's taking the footage home instead by using the cloud or another storage device, which is likely. So, is this enough for you to kill him? It's enough, but he might have more footage stored somewhere else. First, time to get out of this damn bathroom. Jason exited the bathroom and grabbed the plastic bags he placed outside the door before he went in, and made his way back to the counter. He picked up a box of watermelon-flavored gum on the way. When he arrived, the old man was no longer behind the counter, leaving the two girls behind. But he could hear the movement of the old man behind the door to the right side of the counter. Gonna buy this pack of gum, too. Jason held up the pack of gum, drawing their eyes to it. He raised his other hand, the one holding a 5,000 yen bill, and deftly grabbed the listening device as he raised it before putting it back in the ring. He then placed the bill on the counter. Keep the change, said Jason before placing the pack of gum inside one of the plastic bags. 5,000 yen isn't that much money, anyway. The door slid open with an electronic chime as Jason exited. Thank you and please come again. Thank you and please come again. Chapter 5, Evening Snack. In a particular street of Tokyo, if one listened closely, they could hear a slightly audible zipping sound from above. Jason stashed the grappling gun in the ring and grabbed onto the building's edge, his fingers slipping against the rough brick surface, and with a powerful yank, he launched himself into the air before landing on the roof of the 3 stories tall building with a muffled thud. 2 plastic bags filled with food and water bottles hung from his other hand. The crescent moon hung low in the sky, casting a gentle glow on the roof of the building, and a whisper of wind caressed his hair. The roof was mostly empty, having around 1 meter tall walls covering the edges. A door to his right led to the lower floor, and plant pots were scattered in groups of 3 along the outer edges of the roof. He set his bags down on one side of the roof, taking out a couple of granola bars and unwrapping one of them. Sitting down with his back on the wall, he bit half of it off in one bite. The moon, Wheatley sighed in content. You know, that was where Joe picked me up from. That's an interesting piece of information, Jason thought. Oh, how'd you end up on the surface of the moon? Were you a part of a space station or a moon base? Asked Jason as he stared at the moon. He found its soft light calming. Oh, Wheatley let out a shuddering hiss, as if he was struggling to contain a painful memory. I don't really want to delve into how I got there, but I'll give you the summarized version. Basically, an old friend of mine accidentally opened a portal on the moon, and coincidentally, that portal was also connected to a portal on Earth. And because of that, I got sucked into the portal because of the vacuum on the moon. And after that, I just floated in space, aimlessly, with some other robot companions. One of them was quite annoying because he kept saying the same thing over and over again, but I digress. And what about when Joe picked you up? Jason asked. Maybe Wheatley's experience could give him more insight on what Joe was capable of. When Joe picked me up. Well, it's quite the story. Wheatley said. There I was, stranded in space for who knows how long. Pieces of metal floated around me with a robot that kept saying space every 5 seconds, and suddenly, I see a bright flash of blue light. It was the brightest thing I had ever seen, and when the light disappeared, Joe stood there in all his bald glory. As I wondered how a human can talk and survive in outer space, he introduced himself as this godlike being and asked me if I would like to work for him forever in exchange of a bunch of stuff, and most of them benefited me. The best one, in my opinion, was the fact that I'd have something else to do aside from just floating in space with only my own thoughts to accompany me. So, at that point, it didn't really take that much thought for me to make a decision. That's it. He expected more. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. And now here we are, with me inside your head, or body, or is it your mind? I'm not too sure which one is correct, but one thing I am sure about is that I'm glad to be working with you. Right. Jason replied with uncertainty. We're in the same boat now, Wheatley. At least we have someone to talk to. I completely agree with you. All I had for a conversation partner in that void was that robot I mentioned before. Trust me, you do not want to be stuck in space with him. I'll take your word for it. So can you tell me what functions you have? Of course. My functions include language analysis and translation, material fabrication, and assembly. Hollow, you know what? Why don't I just download it into your mind? That'll be a lot quicker than me listing it off one by one. Jason's eyes glazed over as a barrage of information entered his mind in a sudden rush, clouding it for a moment. Seconds later, Jason shook his head as his mind started to clear up. Damn. Okay, you have some pretty useful functions. Jason held his chin in thought. Wheatley, activate external deployment. Oh, I like that one. Okay, activating now. According to the information Wheatley downloaded into his mind, external deployment was a function that allowed Wheatley to take shape outside of his soul, and in front of his eyes, Wheatley came into existence. At first glance, Wheatley seemed unremarkable. He floated above the ground and was a small, round, metal sphere about the size of a bowling ball, with a pale blue and white color scheme, and two handles, one above and below his eye. Hello? Wow, it's great to be out in the world again, Wheatley said, his single eye looking around the roof before locking onto the moon. But it baffled Jason how Wheatley's one eye could convey more emotions than Jason thought possible for a robot. Ah, there it is. The moon. The cause of my downfall, I mean, the home of my friend. It really is quite lovely though. Up there in space, all I could see were the moon's craters. But down here, the moon is quite the sight to behold. Absolutely marvelous. Jason wiped his hands off and threw the last protein bar into the bag before gulping down the water from the remaining water bottle. As he stood up from the ground, the bag filled with garbage disappeared from his hands and into the ring. Do you mind getting back on track? I still want to see some of the other functions you have. Wheatley looked back at Jason with slight embarrassment. Right. Sorry about that. I was just taking it all in for a moment. Which function do you want to try? Display a hologram of Gotham City along with all the underground tunnels and passageways. Jason wanted to see how accurate Wheatley's hologram function would be. He assumed Wheatley would already have his memories in order to better assist him. Three-dimensional hologram of Gotham City, coming right up. Wheatley's blue eye glowed and emitted a cone of blue light that immediately formed a flat plane. Structures in the shape of buildings, roads, stores, and more emerged from the plane, which acted as the barrier that separated what was above and below ground. It was a hologram the size of a small table, and it was seemingly perfectly accurate in every aspect. Jason circled the hologram, checking every detail he could, and he could find no errors. It was a model of the city based on his memory and knowledge, and he had lived in Gotham for most of his life. He was confident in the knowledge of Gotham City he had attained after all this time. Of course, there might be secret areas he wasn't aware of, but he's completely assured of himself that aside from maybe the Court of Owls, League of Shadows, and some others who worked with or under Batman, no one knew the city better than him. Thank you. You can turn it off now. Wheatley nodded, and the light retracted back into his eye. This time, let's try out your audio recording feature. Record this and play it back. 91939. Got it. Wheatley nodded. 91939. Wheatley echoed his recording with perfect clarity. Jason crossed his arms in thought. I can think of situations this could be useful in, but the function itself is very circumstantial. Alright, that's enough testing for now, Wheatley. We'll continue next time, so return to your normal state. We're going back to the store. Can I stay out just a bit longer? Pretty please. I want to see what human civilization is like. Where I used to operate, only one human was alive. Everyone else was killed by the maniacal robot that lorded over everyone. Fine. Jason leaned over the wall. Activate stealth mode and follow me. Roger that. Wheatley activated stealth mode and turned invisible. Seeing that Wheatley complied immediately, Jason crouched and launched himself off of the roof. A few minutes later, Jason stood on top of a building next to the closed convenience store building with his WayneTech tablet in hand. He could sense Wheatley floating around the area, sightseeing. His fingers danced across the screen with extraordinary dexterity as he deleted the footage stored inside the cameras and the tablet the old man used as the main storage device and to view the girls in the store. Simultaneously, Jason reprogrammed the main storage device's software so that any recorded footage was deleted seconds later. The sick bastard already had weeks' worth of footage saved. There were multiple cameras set up in the employee-only rooms, including the locker room, where the cameras recorded footage of the girls in their underwear as they were changing. The evidence here was more than enough to put him in jail and then some. His mind went back to what Wheatley said about anomalies in this world. Was bad enough, but Stockholm Syndrome on steroids? It made Jason wonder if he should focus on finding more anomalies similar to this one before eliminating them in order to at least keep track of the things he should look out for. But his question was, what would cause such an anomaly? That's why we're going to investigate it. Joe told me that there are a lot of similar Earths to this one in that they have anomalies as well. Although most of them aren't as bad. Some of the worst are the ones that give birth to demons, monsters, zombies, malevolent gods. It's really quite a lot. Malevolent gods? Those are way above my pay grade, Jason muttered. Alright, this is almost done. I'll go to where that old man lives and take him out after this. I've already pinged his phone's signal. He won't be able to hide anywhere unless he turns his phone off or if it's dead, but even if that happens, I can just track his phone's current or last known location based on its GPS data and search the area. Moments later, the reprogramming finished and Jason stored the tablet in the ring. He front-flipped onto the next building's roof with extraordinary finesse and grace, landing without a sound. Was it just him or did he always have this habit of using acrobatics unnecessarily? He was definitely far better at it and enjoyed doing it more than before as well. Jason realized the implications of that and slightly frowned as he realized the soul merging might have affected him more than Joe thought. Jason shook his head clear. Enough distractions. Let's go. Wait. Don't leave me behind. Slowing down to let Wheatley catch up, Jason brought out the Wayne-Tech phone and sprinted off, jumping from roof to roof with little to no sound from his movements. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Eliminated. The chilly evening breeze blew Jason's hair back as he leapt from building to building, flipping and spinning through the air with remarkable poise and balance. Wheatley, still undetectable to the human eye, silently trailed behind him. With a single glance at the Wayne-Tech phone in his hand, he always knew where the old man was. On the phone's screen, a map illuminated the old man's coordinates in real time, and the device suggested he should reach the old man in under a minute if he kept up his current speed. However, the ping's location hasn't moved for a while now, so Jason concluded the old man must be at his apartment right now or must have left his phone while he went out. Moments later, Jason reached the building across from the old man's 5-story apartment complex. Opposite to him were the balconies of the building, and one of them was the old man's. Based on the phone's readings on his screen, it was the one directly in front of him on the 4th floor. From his position, he noticed the darkness of the old man's one-room apartment, which meant he wasn't home. Convenient. I could gather information and see if he has more footage saved in his devices here. How are you going to get over there? You'll see, Jason answered with confidence. He surveyed the area and concentrated on his senses, making sure no people were nearby. Having enhanced senses was far more useful than he thought. The only sounds he could hear were the snores of people sleeping and the sound of televisions, and he could neither see nor hear a single person nearby who could see him leap to the balcony. There was the option of using his grappling gun, but he preferred using his own hands and feet when traversing buildings. Jason took 5 steps back, and Wheatley took one look at him, the gap between the buildings and the balcony before immediately coming to an understanding. Oh, I don't think you'll be able to reach the balcony. The gap is quite wide. I know you're quite athletic, but this is just 11 meters of air separated the balcony from the building he was on, and the sound of a distant car horn echoed up 5 stories from the ground. Wheatley's warnings faded into the background as Jason sprinted forward, ready to take on the jump. He's not listening to me. Wheatley looked away immediately and closed his eye. Oh, I'm not watching this. With one last step, he launched himself off the roof, the wind blowing back his hair and clothes as he rotated his arms to gain momentum. Reaching the end of his jump, Jason grabbed onto the edge, his fingers gripping the cold metal of the balcony's edge as he hauled himself up. Well, that was easy. Jason turned to glance at Wheatley. Even though he couldn't see him, their connection allowed him to sense where he was precisely. Wheatley, you can look now. You made it. Wheatley whipped towards him in surprise. Wow, now I regret looking away. I wish I could have seen that jump. It must have been marvelous. Have more trust in my abilities. Jason smirked as Wheatley floated towards him. You won't be disappointed. Returning to the task at hand, Jason retrieved from the ring a red mask that covered the bottom half of his face, including his eyes. It was equipped with multiple features, and a voice modulator was one of them, which would help with the intimidation factor. Along with the mask, Jason brought out and wore a pair of black gloves composed of a material that would leave no trace behind. Carefully, he nudged the balcony's glass sliding door to see if it was locked. It wasn't, giving him free entry into the messy apartment. But because of his height, he had to duck his head to avoid hitting the top of the doorway. I definitely need to measure how tall I am when I get the chance. It feels like I grew a few inches. Jason surveyed the one-room apartment. Unwashed dishes piled up in the sink, random pieces of garbage scattered on the ground and bags of them stored in one corner, and some articles of clothing were haphazardly placed around the small, one-person apartment. Now he was really glad that he wore his mask equipped with an air filter before entering, because it seemed like if he removed it, his nose would not be thanking him. This room is so unhygienic. That guy will need to hire a janitor at this rate. Wheatley commented with disgust as looked around the same room. Jason agreed and disagreed. One janitor wouldn't be enough, and even 2 janitors wouldn't be enough for all of this. A strange contrast in the room was a small, spotless area, so pristine compared to the rest. It was the area closest to the right wall. Set on a small table was a closed laptop, along with a box of tissue next to a pillow in front of it. A garbage bin filled with rolled-up tissue paper was next to it as well. It didn't take a detective to know what the old man regularly did in this area of the room. After opening and booting up the laptop, Jason wirelessly connected it to his phone, which allowed him to see everything stored inside, including the footage he'd saved up, and it was worse than what Jason expected. The earliest footage dated back to the last week of February, and because it was almost April, that meant he had been spying and recording footage of the girls for a month. Maybe more, because based on what his phone displayed, gigabytes of data were transferred into another device a month before the oldest current footage was saved. Oh, hacking. It's quite different from what I normally do, though. My method's more hands-on. Jason immediately deleted every single current video footage in the device, including the one stored in the cloud, because there would be no point in reprogramming this laptop after he was done. Last, he checked any government websites the old man entered and found one. It only took a slight moment for his phone to hack into the website and find out the old man's personal info. What he found only further disgusted him. Yoshihiro Shimoda. That pervert's actually the damn uncle of Shiori Fatsuki and Yui Nakaizumi, the two high school girls from the store. And here I was thinking he was just a run-of-the-mill creep, but recording your nieces and jerking off to them. And didn't Wheatley imply he was going to them? Jason narrowed his eyes at the government photo of the old man on the phone screen. He's dead meat. Yoshihiro Shimoda's POV. Standing in the elevator of his apartment building, Yoshihiro waited for it to reach his apartment's floor, carrying a plastic bag filled with instant ramen and microwave meals. He didn't think it would work, but he convinced the manager to let him have a day off tomorrow. He really needed to thank Yui-chan for giving him the excuse he needed. Unlike that blonde-haired bitch, she at least had good qualities. She was kind, polite, and thoughtful, and didn't insult him with every sentence that came out of her mouth. The elevator stopped, a chime sounded out in tandem with the elevator doors opening, and he stepped out. Grinning, he thought back to his plan. A plan which would give him the opportunity to make that blonde-haired bitch his. He'd plant an item from the store inside her bag, and blackmail her with the risk of expulsion from her school. And without her scholarship, how was she going to help her mother? Oh, he could only imagine the look of despair on her face. Entering his apartment, he kicked off his shoes and turned on the lights. While walking to his table, he opened his plastic bag filled with food, completely unaware of the figure looming behind him. His plan was foolproof. If all goes well, by the end of it, he'd have her kneeling in front him, sucking his. Yoshihiro was interrupted from his thoughts by an unexpected and loud click from behind. He whipped his head to turn around, only to have the barrel of a gun, fitted with a suppressor, shoved into his mouth and forcing him back until his head slammed into the wall behind him with a painful jolt. He shook like a leaf, eyes watering, as he came face to face with a large man that towered over him, covered by a red mask that hid his lower face. The man's voice was deep and distorted, like something out of a sci-fi flick. Listen here, you disgusting bastard. If you make a single cry for help, I will kill you immediately, so don't even try doing anything stupid. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die, Yoshihiro thought to himself, his body trembling with fear. His heart felt like a drum in his chest, and he could feel the perspiration pooling on his skin. Now, I'm gonna ask you a question and you will either nod or shake your head. Nod if you understand. Yoshihiro shakily nodded his head, tears now running down his face. The figure took the gun out of his mouth and placed it close to his face. Do you know what this is? The pistol in the man's hand suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a familiar black camera. His eyes widened with recognition in response. He hesitated to do as the intruder told, but it seemed that one reaction was enough of an affirmation to the man. So you do know what this is? The man hummed, then crushed the camera as if it was made of paper. He slowly opened his hand and the tiny bits of metal and glass, along with the wires, dropped onto the floor like powder. Yoshihiro gulped and his body shook even more, magically making things disappear and crushing a metal camera with one hand. Who know, what the hell is this monster? The masked man gave Yoshihiro a glowering glare that almost made him piss himself. His voice was low and menacing as he spoke. Here's the deal. I know you have more footage than the ones on your laptop, so you either tell me where the rest of the footage is, or I will twist every limb in your body, and it will be painful. That, I guarantee. I'll let you go in 3 seconds, and by the time I lift my hand, you better have an answer. And let me remind you again that if you try anything, you're dead. Nod if you understand. Yoshihiro rapidly nodded his head in response. After 3 seconds, the man let go and Yoshihiro dropped to his knees, forming a doxa. I'll tell you, he whimpered, his body still trembling. The video footage you asked about is all on someone else's computer? An acquaintance of mine. I told him about what I did, and he wanted some of the footage for himself. He's the one who gave me the cameras. His name is Tsunetaka Karaki. I can give you his address. He raised his torso up and looked at the man with desperation on his face. Just please don't K. Not giving him a chance to continue, the figure pulled the trigger. With a sound that resembled a cat sneeze, a bullet tore through his head, blowing it to bits, and the life slowly left from his eyes. Bits of skin, brain matter, and bone scattered and his lifeless body fell with a thud. Jason's POV. Lowering his pistol, Jason stared at the body with cold eyes. He felt no remorse or guilt for killing Yoshihiro. Besides, he got the info he wanted, and that was enough. This waste of human life was eventually going to do something to the girls in the store sooner or later. From what his body language told Jason before he interrogated him, Yoshihiro was excited in more ways than one. And when he saw that grin on the man's face, his intuition and experience told him it was the grin of a man planning to do something criminal soon. It didn't help that when he asked Wheatley for confirmation of his speculations, Wheatley told him he was right. The day after tomorrow, he would likely blackmail the blonde girl and would start the other girl as well. It would all happen within a few days, so to prevent it, he pulled the trigger in advance. Jason's motto was, let the punishment fit the crime. And wasn't prevention better than a cure? The Yoshihiro from a minute ago didn't commit a crime heinous enough to deserve death, in his opinion. But in this case, he could make an exception. Returning the gun into the ring, Jason asked, "What happens now, Wheatley?" Wheatley deactivated stealth mode, revealing his white, spherical body floating right above Yoshihiro's dead carcass. Beginning absorption of anomaly energy. Absorption of anomaly energy? Yoshihiro's dead body suddenly glowed blue, including the bits of him that got torn off his body, gaining the curious raise of an eyebrow from Jason. Strands of black, hazy energy rose from his dead body and the scattered bits. The strands of energy all headed to Wheatley, who absorbed the energy. Moments later, it was as if the body had never existed. Absorption complete. Wheatley floated over to Jason. A very tiny amount of dark primordial energy possessing him seems to have been the cause of his disgusting human debaucheries. Wheatley paused for a slight moment. Actually, with what I'm looking at here, that might not be the case. You see, I've also absorbed his memories. Most of the recent ones aren't nice at all, and from what I can see, the man was quite the pervert, even as a child. He even attempted one of his classmates when he was 14 years old. So in this case, it's safe to say that the dark primordial energy might have just been enhancing his perversion and would create the Stockholm Syndrome on steroids effect if he had gotten his hands on the human females. Aside from the Stockholm, you know what? I'm just gonna start calling it the SSS effect from now on. Too much of a mouthful. As I was saying, according to my analysis of this sample, after prolonged intercourse, aside from the SSS effect, the subjects will experience abnormal pleasure and a reduction of their decision-making ability. A furrow formed on Jason's brow. So he'd been possessed by this energy, causing him to have abnormally dark desires and making him act on them along with a host of negative after effects. Those barely told him anything and only gave him more unanswered questions. Crossing his arms, Jason asked, "What do you mean by dark primordial energy? How can we use it to eliminate the source of this anomaly?" Well, according to Joe's database, dark primordial energy can only come from a being that has existed in the void before a universe's birth. Here, it caused Yoshihiro to give in to his dark desires, which were amplified by the energy. We might actually be dealing with something far above our level here. I'll contact Joe and see what he thinks about this. Wheatley's eye grows a tad brighter. That was a good idea. It sounded like he was dealing with a Darksate level threat. Even with his power up, he wasn't stupid enough to assume that he could take on that kind of threat. Wheatley continued. And to answer your second question, I'll need more energy to start tracking the source and create a plan to eliminate it. How much more are we talking about? He had a feeling that it was gonna be a lot. Approximately 4,000 times this quantity of energy. Jason rubbed his forehead in irritation. 4,000 times. I don't even know how long that'll take to finish. There's no need to worry. Wheatley confidently assured. With my help, it won't take long for us to get much more energy than this. For now, even though I can't track the source, I'll be able to sense and identify similar anomalies that occur nearby by scanning for traces of the dark primordial energy. I hope that works, cause if I have to kill 4,000 more Yoshihiros, I might as well create a virus that's programmed to only target a specific group of people. At least that way is more efficient than wasting bullets. Wheatley leaned in closer with curiosity in his eye. Can you? That would be quite the sight to see. I was joking. He could do it, but he didn't have the resources or the capital to actually execute the plan. Might as well save it as a plan B or C, then. Looking around with a glint in his eyes, Jason quickly spotted the most valuable items in the apartment. Pieces of technology, food, and money. There might be more hidden somewhere. Now there's an idea. No one else was going to use them anymore, so he might as well take them. After all, one man's trash could be another man's treasure. Chapter 7, Nightmare. After pillaging every valuable and resource he could find inside Yoshihiro's apartment, Jason grappled away from the balcony, making sure there were no traces of his stay before leaving. He landed on the sidewalk of the street silently before storing the grapple gun. He looked up to the night sky, the clouds a blanket of darkness, blocking out the moonlight. What are your plans now, Jason? For now, I need to find a place to sleep. I'm really fucking tired. It's Lee. A loud yawn escaped his mouth. Like I could close my eyes and immediately fall asleep right now. He could normally go for days without sleep with almost no problems, so it was strange to feel like just wanting to get knocked out for a day or two, even though he's only been awake for a few hours at most. Wheatley hummed inquisitively. Joe told me this would happen eventually. It's a side effect of your body adapting and improving because of your now more powerful soul. The process itself requires your soul to reconstruct and improve your body gradually so that it wouldn't crumble like paper under the power of the soul inhabiting it. Jason suppressed another yawn that threatened to come out. That soul stuff Joe did, huh? Come to think of it, you didn't have a soul since you were a robot, so how did Joe alter you and take you with him? Wheatley tilted his spherical body to the side and looked at him with uncertainty in his eye. I don't really know. When he placed his hand on me, I felt a rush of energy surge through me, and I was suddenly within your mind with a new form and capabilities that were designed to help you with your missions. Along with that were a new set of memories and directives in my mainframe. I see. Jason wondered if Joe just yanked other beings and tossed them somewhere else as a hobby. For now, I suggest letting your body rest since forcing yourself to stay awake will only further prolong the process. Jason agreed. He already felt like passing out without caring if he slept on a random building's roof, but he preferred a place with a better environment. For now, he needed to find a place to stay. preferably a pleasant apartment with enough room for him, but that seemed unlikely at the moment. And his new body's size would make things inconvenient. It turns out, there was no need to find a ruler to measure himself because Wheatley was connected to him and knew the state of his body down to the subatomic level. JAS told him he was now approximately 6 feet and 6 inches tall. A whole 6 inches taller than his previous height, and he was now even taller than Bruce by about 4 inches. That meant small apartments were excluded from his criteria since his larger than normal body wouldn't fit. He'd rather sleep in one of the nice-looking parks Tokyo had than stay in a cramped apartment where he'd always have to duck when going through doorways. With his destination in mind, he hacked into someone's Wi-Fi, which was named Oppai for some reason, and searched for the nearest park. Wheatley saw the Wi-Fi name and narrowed his eyes speculatively. I don't know much about you humans, but I think that the man who owns that Wi-Fi desperately needs the touch of a female. Jason had no issues agreeing with that statement. Boobs. Really dude? With the path to the park laid out in his mind, Jason started freerunning at his max speed, avoiding obstacles in his path, and becoming a dark blur moving across the rooftops. Moments later, he reached one of Tokyo's Western-style parks, Hibiya Park. From his view on top of a building, blooming trees and flowers filled his vision, which was complemented by the moon's soft glow casting a soft blanket of moonlight. The pleasant and relaxing scent of the flowers and nature pervaded his sense of smell. Jason jumped down the alley next to the building and strolled towards the park. He immersed himself in the park's calm atmosphere during his stroll. The sound of crickets and swaying tree branches allowed him to take his mind off of things for a moment. When he arrived near the lake, the image of the moon's reflection along with the falling leaves created a picturesque scene that made his hand twitch. The urge to draw or paint such a sight sparked despite never having such an urge before. He ignored it, making a mental note to investigate it later. Despite it being late into the night, quite a few people were in the area as well. Couples walked hand in hand or holding each other's arms, and some were merely doing the same thing as him and were taking a stroll through the park. Sighing, Jason sat down, resting his back on a tree's trunk nearby the lake. This spot is nice. I have a beautiful view of the lake, a refreshing, cool breeze, Jason groaned, stretching his arms and placing them behind his head, and I even have this perfect angle to sleep on. I agree. It is quite a view, Wheatley stared, entranced by the sight. Jason. The stillness of the air was only broken by the sound of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Jason was already asleep. Eyes shut, his stomach rose and fell steadily. Good night and sweet dreams, Jason. Unfortunately, his sleep would not be ones filled with pleasant dreams, but horrid nightmares. Third-person POV. In a sealed-off and isolated room in Arkham Asylum, the bloody and bruised figure of Jason in his Robin suit hung, his arms tied with a rope hanging from a hook, and his mouth covered by a piece of cloth. Sensing the Joker nearby, he woke up, startled and immediately trying to unbind the rope, but to no avail. His body was too tired and too bruised to where he could only manage to move in short bursts. It's been a year since he had been captured by the Joker. A year of constant physical and mental torture only the bastard could think of. In the end, as it had always been for God knows how long, there was nothing he could do, so he gave up. With a lifeless look in his eyes, Jason's head dangled as if he was asleep. The Joker stepped in from the side, the bright purple of his suit contrasting with the darkness of the room. As he looked at Jason with a maniacal grin, he ran his fingers along the metal rod, its end shaped into a J. The letter glowed a soft orange in the dim room. Wakey, wakey dot. Jason kept his head down. He just wanted this to be over. What's wrong? Do you think I'm going to hurt you? The Joker asked, brandishing the metal rod in his hand and tapping the heated end with his gloved hand. It sizzled with every tap. Why? I'm not the bad one here. Oh, no, 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 no. Turning around, he pointed at Jason. It's Batman. He's abandoned you, like an unwanted puppy. Jason's jaw clenched. Spotting the clenched jaw, the Joker's grin widened. Oh, how lovely. The Joker crouched and looked up as if a taller person stood in front of him, and spoke while imitating a child's voice. Can I have him, Daddy? Oh please, 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 I'll take real good care of him. Jason still refused to look at the Joker. He didn't know what the hell the Joker planned on doing, but his sense of foreboding grew. The Joker stepped forward and turned around, standing at his full height. He looked down at his previous position, as if taking the role of the parent, and spoke gently in his normal rough and raspy voice. Anything to make you happy, princess. Just make sure people know he's yours. The Joker abruptly snapped his fingers, and Jason fell to the ground in a heap, the rope that tied him to the hook having been cut. We don't want him to end up back here, do we? The Joker stepped closer, the look he gave Jason and his grin becoming more sadistic with each step. Jason flinched when he spotted the glowing end of the metal rod. Fearfully, he crawled away from the Joker as quickly as he could, even though every movement he made produced great gasps of pain. The Joker playfully leaned down at Jason, speaking in a poor imitation of a child's voice. No, we don't, Daddy. I want to keep him forever. No, no please, please, no, no. Jason begged with fear and desperation in his voice. But the Joker ignored it. This made life worth living? Oh, how I wish to see the look on Batman's face when he sees this. With a gleeful cackle, the Joker lunged towards Jason. Nuo. That night, Jason's cries of despair filled Arkham's dreary halls. Chapter 8, shit. Jason, whose mind was still reeling from the vivid nightmares, opened his eyes to an unusual sight close to noon. Joe and Wheatley floated on opposite sides of a chessboard in the middle of the park. Although Wheatley didn't have limbs, he constructed a mechanical arm out of solid blue light in order to move the chess pieces. After taking one look at them, Jason closed his eyes, letting his head fall back on the tree's trunk. He tiredly sighed, his voice deep and low. "What are you doing here? I thought you were busy with some urgent matters." Joe didn't answer immediately and moved his knight piece forward, attacking Wheatley's bishop and rook and making him grunt frustratedly. "The data sample Wheatley sent intrigued me, and finding dark primordial energy in a universe uninhabited by beings capable of producing it doesn't normally happen, so I came here to personally investigate. Did you check if there really isn't anything in this universe capable of making that energy?" "I did. But what I found wasn't a god or primordial of some sort. It was a hole connected to another dimension leaking dark primordial energy. I sealed it already, but the damage has been done and I don't know the extent it's reached. I also traced it back to its origin and found a wall of some sort. The type of wall that could prevent someone like me from looking further into it." Jason frowned at what Joe implied. A being capable of hindering him must at least be around Joe's level in POW. "The entity that leaked the dark primordial energy into this universe is not on my level," Joe interrupted, and Jason could sense that he was offended by such a thought. "The wall that I encountered was made by the being that rules the section of the multiverse the entity comes from. Big boss over there is called the One Above All. That one is the guy who's on my level. Not the dem bug I would crush if I was able to." "If you were able to?" Jason looked at Joe and asked with a raised eyebrow. "Does that mean you're not able to go and do it right now?" Joe shook his head. "Unfortunately, no. And don't ask why. It's complicated." "Was it related to the penalty he received? The one Joe told him about when he was dead?" A grin then adorned Joe's face, and Jason suddenly got a bad feeling in his stomach. Joe slowly looked away from the chessboard and pointed at him. But you certainly could." Jason looked at Joe with a deadpan expression. "If you think I'm even close to being capable of killing something like a god, then you're delusional. Also, you didn't tell me I'd be dealing with gods, just the scum of the earth and everything else I'm used to dealing with." Joe slowly shook his head with an amused smile. Tisk, tisk. "You're talking about the current you, but I'm talking about the Jason in the future. And I didn't say you wouldn't be dealing with gods. What are you planning?" Jason asked with narrowed eyes. "You'll see, Jason. You'll see," Joe said ominously before moving his queen from across the board and trapping the king with no way out. "And that, my robot friend, is a checkmate." "Good game." Wheatley groaned frustratedly. "Yugh. This is completely ridiculous. I demand a rematch. This time, I'll be white." Joe snapped his fingers, and the chessboard vanished. "No can do. I have appointments I have to take care of." "And Jason," he called out. "What?" grunted Jason, still trying to guess what Joe implied. "You need to find Saki Yashida today. As I said before, the damage has been done, which means some things will happen sooner than they should. The dark primordial energy that causes this anomaly you found had also entered normal humans, and she's one of the new hosts. I don't think I have to tell you how bad that is." Jason nodded with a tense look and stood up. "I'll find her, don't worry. If that energy could amplify people's dark desires and induce other negative effects, something similarly dangerous is likely to happen to Saki Yashida and the others who have become its hosts." Wheatley nodded. "We'll have it taken care of." "All right. I'll leave it to you two. See ya," said Joe, disappearing after a bright flash of light. Similar to when he first left. Wheatley looked at the spot where Joe had previously stood. "Welp. He's gone?" He turned to Jason. "So, I take it you didn't have a good night's rest? You were frowning and mumbling in your sleep." Wheatley's question reminded him of the vivid nightmare. But now that he thought about it clearly, it was too real. It felt like each emotion, each thought, and each action were something that he experienced in the past. Wait, that was it. The gaps in the memories of the other Jasons. The one Deathstroke mentored in particular. If he filled in the large gap with the nightmares he had, everything would fit in perfectly. The torture, the manipulation, the mental trauma, and the feeling of helplessness that remained even after he escaped. There was also the scar on his cheek shaped in the letter J. The other version of him would see it on his own helmet's reflection, and every time, he would glare at it with rage. "I'm fine," he lied. His thoughts were still stuck on the other Jason's memories, which slowly became clearer and more complete the more he focused on them. "I was just reminded of something that happened in the past." Jason looked at the tree leaves, the sun's golden rays passing through the gaps. "We're wasting daylight. Let's go." Jason took out the black face mask he bought from the store the night before and wore it. Hopefully, this will reduce the amount of attention he'll get, but he doubted it would do much at all. "Wheatley, do you still want to stay in your current form?" He looked towards Wheatley, who eagerly nodded his body in response. "Absolutely. I imagine seeing human civilization during the day will differ quite a bit from at night, and I want to see things in person. Not through your eyes. Also, I'm not saying that looking through your eyes is." "Wheatley, are you that afraid of offending me? Look, I'm fine with you staying as you are for as long as you want." Jason shrugged. "Just be discreet. Enter stealth mode, don't do anything that'll attract attention, and follow me." Wheatley wordlessly complied and turned invisible as Jason walked out of the park. There were more people during the day than he thought there would be, though he should have expected it since Tokyo is the capital of Japan. Strangely enough, almost no one seemed to glance or look at him. Jason had expected some stares or glances because of his tall stature and large physique, which made him tower over everyone. He had been forced to move aside when people almost bumped into him, and when he bumped into someone on purpose to see their reaction, they jumped in fright and apologized, reacting as if they hadn't noticed him before they bumped into him even though they were clearly looking and walking in his direction. As soon as he finished that though, Jason recalled what happened with Yoshihiro at the convenience store. Didn't that piece of shit say that he didn't notice him at all? He could recall the exact words the pervert said on the receiver. A ghost that just popped out of nowhere. Does that mean my presence is completely hidden, as if I were trying to conceal myself even when I'm in broad daylight? Jason frowned as he tried to understand how that came to be. The accumulation of compatible information causing qualitative evolutions. Isn't that what Joe said? And yet, I still can't understand how that results in whatever is happening to me. For now, Jason put the thought in the back of his mind, along with the strong urge to draw from last night. Right now, he had a person to find. As soon as Jason was near someone's Wi-Fi, he hacked into it. He still remembered the name and image of Saki Yashida's high school from the vision Joe showed him. A quick search of the high school's name gave him an address. For now, it was the best lead he had. Unfortunately, Japan's government stored a person's private information on a document which was stored inside one of their offices, and trying to look for Saki Yashida's among all of them is too inefficient and time-consuming. With the directions inside his head, Jason entered an alley and made his way up to the roof. From there, he began traveling as fast as he currently could while evading obstacles, which was around 65 miles per hour 105 kilometers per hour, without minding the people below or anyone inside the skyscrapers that might see him. If his presence was completely hidden, which was what he speculated, then no one would notice him running from roof to roof. Behind Jason, Wheatley quietly followed while observing his surroundings with amazement. Wheatley, Jason mentally called as he stood on the high school's rooftop, looking over the whole campus. What is it, Jason? Can you scan for traces of dark primordial energy within a 16-kilometer, 10-mile, radius with the school as the center? I'm going inside to see if I can find Saki Yashida's information from their school database. She should be enrolled here already. Leave it to me, but this is gonna take a couple of minutes, so you can take your time. Jason thanked him and headed inside the school. He passed through the school's hallways and found his way to the principal's room. It was locked, but he simply picked the lock with a bobby pin he took out from his ring. Inside the principal's room was a table with a large office chair behind it and a pair of cushioned chairs in front. Medals, certificates, and trophies sat behind a locked display case behind the principal's chair. But what Jason gunned for immediately was the computer sitting on the principal's table. Jason connected his tablet to the computer via cable, allowing him to connect to the school's database, find Saki Yashida's information, and download it. After everything was done, Jason disconnected the tablet. All right, I've got her address. There was no need to stay inside the office anymore, and just as he stepped out the door, Wheatley contacted him. Jason, I've finished the scan. There are multiple signatures of dark primordial energy within 16 kilometers, 10 miles, of the school. Jason frowned at how many signatures Wheatley detected. Good job. We'll take care of the others later. He pulled out his phone and searched her address using the school's Wi-Fi. I have Saki Yashida's home address and I'm gonna start making my way there. With how grave Joe sounded, something might have already happened to her, so I'm gonna go ahead. Make sure you catch up. Yeah, I'll catch up. No problem. Jason sensed the hidden uncertainty in his voice. You can just revert into your previous state if you don't feel like catching up, Jason said as he ran across the rooftops towards the address. Right. I can do that. Why am I still so forgetful? I'll be right there. Jason felt Wheatley return to his soul. Never thought I'd ever feel my soul, but here I am. Just ignore me and continue with what you're doing. The direction you're heading in has one of the signatures I detected, which should be the girl. Also, the signatures are, you know what? Doesn't matter. Probably just a coincidence. He wondered what that was about. I'm speeding up. Jason, with a sense of urgency, quickly accelerated until he reached the speed of approximately 70 mph, 113 kilometers per hour. Chapter 9. Too late? Shit. Jason quickly leapt over the front gate and kicked the front door down before he ran down the hall, turned left, and jumped up to the second floor. Jason could hear which room the sounds came from and immediately kicked it open. Inside, Saki Yashida was below her large father on the bed, struggling to push him off of her as he tried to force his face closer to her face and restricted her arm. He wore no pants or underwear, revealing his naked lower body. Dad? Please, no. An intense fury burned inside him the moment he saw the helplessness in Saki's tear-filled eyes. With no hesitation, he grabbed the man by the neck with one hand and threw him into the wall. The room shook from the impact, and the man fell to the ground in a heap, his eyes rolling all the way back to his head. Jason looked back at Saki. She shook like a leaf and both her hair and clothes were a mess. She looked at him, her gaze lingering, and then back at her father, motionless on the floor, her eyes widening in surprise. Dad? What just happened to him? Who are you? What should he tell her? It should be something that sounds unlikely but not impossible. I was walking outside your house when I heard your screams. You sounded like you needed help. Jason grabbed the blanket from the ground and slowly approached the poor girl, who was still letting out tears and sniffling, but she flinched away from him and covered herself. He could tell that she was intimidated by him, and whether it was because of what he did to her father or his large stature, he didn't know. But it was understandable, given what almost happened to her and the fact that he basically barged into their house and threw her bastard of a father into the wall. He crouched down, making himself seem smaller, and spoke in a gentle tone. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you, and I understand that you're still distressed by what just happened. Here, use this to cover yourself up. He placed the blanket in front of her and slowly backed away with his hands open in front of him. She looked at him apprehensively before slowly grabbing the blanket and covering her body with it. The action reminded him of a dog being wary of a stranger. Inside, Jason simply felt relieved. He arrived just in time before anything worse could happen. However, the trauma she'll have after this won't just go away after a short amount of time, and she'll likely need therapy in the future. There was also her father. He knew she must be having a hard time dealing with that. Poor girl. But because we can't kill her, we're going to need to knock her out so that I can extract the energy inside her safely and quickly. Though I can already tell you won't do so anytime soon. Why would I? She's already dealing with enough shit for the time being. For now, we'll figure out another way to extract the energy. He was sure there was a method that doesn't require knocking her out or killing her, and his mind was already coming up with many possible methods. It only took him a brief moment to think of a viable one. What if we slowly siphoned the energy from her? That could actually work. But I'll need to be close to her for a few hours, and there are still those other energy signatures I detected that should be taken care of. Are you sure you want me to stay? Don't worry. I'll take care of that. Download all the relevant information in my head. Jason already had a plan in mind for those. For now, just make sure you siphon the energy from her without harming her. Alright. Time for me to get to work. A stream of information about where the energy signatures are flowed into his mind before he felt Wheatley exit his soul and manifest beside him in stealth mode. Wheatley floated over to Saki, who was still huddled on the bed with the blanket covering her frame, and blue strings as thin as spider web slowly emerged from her body before connecting to him. Okay, Wheatley nervously trailed off. Remember what I said about this taking a few hours? Scratch that, cause this will probably take at least 15 hours. Jason cupped his chin in thought. That's far longer than I would have liked, but I still want you to finish it. That energy is most likely the one that caused her father to nearly her, and he would have succeeded if I was even half a minute late. If we don't extract the energy, worse things could happen to her. Right. Still, if you need my help, just call for me. You never know if something might happen. I will. Miss, Jason called and Saki glanced at him from the side of her eye. It seems like she's calmed down a little, at least. Is it only you and that man inside the house? Saki shook her head and whispered, no, my mother also lives here, but she went out to buy groceries. I see. Jason took that information in and stood up, heading towards the motionless body of Saki's father on the floor. Saki saw this and nervously clutched the blanket around her tighter. What are you going to do to him? I'm going to make sure your father won't be able to hurt you. Jason lifted her father's body, his hand holding the half-naked man's neck, making sure she didn't see what was still showing down below. He turned his head towards her, his eyes crinkling behind his mask as he gave her the best smile he could. It'll be quick. Stay here for now where it's safe. Jason walked out the door, her father's legs making a scraping sound as they dragged on the floor, and closed it. This left Saki inside her room, staring at the door in silence with only the sound of her breathing accompanying her. Down in the house's living room, Jason tossed her unconscious father's body on the floor as if it was a bag of garbage. He felt the coarseness of the rope he took out of the ring and tied the man's arms and legs up tightly, using a knot few people could escape from. This should keep the bastard still while I deal with the others. There were multiple signatures around the school, but with his speed, he should. Jason's instincts and sixth sense suddenly blare like a siren and he summoned a ninjato, gripping it as he surveys the living room. He could sense that there were multiple enemies surrounding him, and he could hear odd, disturbing cries all around the house. Jason, Wheatley yelled. There's something outside the window? Also, just letting you know, some of the energy signatures I detected from before are all around the house now. Hearing Wheatley's call, Jason rushed outside the house with a gun and sword in hand, coming to a full stop when he sighted the monsters that surrounded the house and were trying to get in. What in the actual fuck are those? Jason stared at the enormous, monstrous-looking, rainbow-colored hornet, snake, bat, and hummingbird. All of them emanated an eerie aura that reminded him of the dark primordial energy they found from before, and created distorted, inhuman cries. The bat had nested up on the rooftop along with the hummingbird, and the snake had wrapped itself around the house. Those monsters are affecting the girl somehow. She doesn't seem to notice them or see them at all, which is good. However, I can tell through our connection that her negative emotions have been abnormally high ever since those monsters showed up, which is bad. I'll see what I can do. Make sure she stays unharmed. In an instant, Jason aimed his silenced pistol and fired at the giant hornet clinging to the side of the house where they stayed in, and his eyes widened in surprise when the bullet merely went through its head harmlessly as if it was water. What surprised him further was that the hornet and every other monster ignored him, not reacting to the fact that he shot one of them. Seeing that they completely ignored him in favor of who was inside the house, the best conclusion he had was that they were all attracted by Saki and the energy inside her. Damn it. This isn't good. Are these things immune to bullets, projectile damage, or physical harm in general? He wondered, sprinting and jumping to its head before he swiped his sword with enough force to cut a human in two with no issue. Again, his sword did no harm to it, and the monsters completely ignored him. Okay, I seem to have run out of options here. What the hell could damage these things? Jason contemplated, his mind browsing through every option when an epiphany hit him. Wait, could these things be magical? Well, it wouldn't hurt to try, and he had no other idea that could work. Jason extended his arms as if he were grasping two swords. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to summon a pair of blades that were effective against any magical being. A second later, a pair of swords flashed into existence in each hand. Tendrils of red electricity-like energy trailed up and down the blades. He had summoned the All Blades, a pair of swords powered by his soul that he could summon at will after mastering the All Cast's teachings. Jason grinned excitedly. The red is new, but it worked. Time to test these babies out. He had a good feeling it would work. Once again, he launched himself into the air until he reached the hornet's head and slashed. A red trail followed the path of the sword as it cut through the head, and its bowling ball-sized head flew into the air for an instant before freezing in place. It didn't bleed like he expected. Instead, Jason watched, enraptured, as its rainbow-colored body completely exploded into nothing and gigantic, white, fractured Japanese kanji crisscrossed in the air before vanishing altogether with a chime. Jason felt curious about why that had occurred. It was most likely related to what these things were, and he planned on investigating it further after finishing the other monsters. 3 loud, distorted cries echoed into the air as the monsters seemed to finally recognize him as a threat. The bat soared into the air with large flaps of its wings, while the hummingbird followed it with rapid flaps of its own smaller wings. Jason concentrated on the snake, which had slowly snuck up behind him after he killed the hornet. He stood still with the blades in hand as he waited for the right moment. The creature lunged forward with its fangs at an incredible speed, but he was even faster, jumping backwards and flipping his blades around into a reverse grip in one fluid movement. From above it, he could see the surprise in the snake's eyes in slow motion, and before it could pull back, Jason impaled both eyes and landed on its head. Gotcha. The snake bucked and writhed like a wild bull, its hiss of pain echoing through the air as it tried to shake him off, but he kept his grip on the blades and remained steady, pushing them further into its head. Even after all that, the snake was still alive, so with a quick motion, he pulled out both blades and drove them towards the snake's brain. The snake's thrashing grew more and more frenzied, sending dust up into the air and the sound of its head smacking the ground echoing around them. However, it was only for a brief moment, the snake swiftly going limp and silent. The entire exchange from beginning to end only took 10 seconds, so it doesn't seem like his efficiency got worse. In fact, it was far faster than what he would have been able to do before. After the snake died, the same thing that happened when he killed the hornet occurred. Its body exploded into nothing and gigantic, white, fractured Japanese kanji crisscrossed in the air before vanishing altogether with a chime. Jason landed on the ground with far more confidence than before. 2 down, 2 more to go. Now where the hell are those flighty bastards? As soon as he finished his sentence, he hears the shout of a woman. Come, Suki, Jinky. Jason looked up in surprise and sights a long, golden-haired woman wearing a short gray skirt and a gray buttonless jacket, black hat, black bra, and long black boots. While she rode a lion, she wielded a whip in one hand and a pistol in the other. What baffled Jason, though, was that she was doing it all in the damn sky, far above every house and building in the neighborhood. Jason took a moment to just stare. That is one of the strangest things I have ever seen in my whole 3 lives. What the fuck is going on in this world? Chapter 10, Bishamon. The golden-haired woman lashed the whip towards the rainbow-colored bat as big as a dinner table, which tried to dodge to the side. The red whip barely caused a tear in its left wing, but it was enough to cause a significant rip around where the whip hit, and the bat began to stumble and fall mid-flight. At this point, Jason could tell that all the weapons she was using most likely had magical properties, since the whip managed to damage the bat. After making the bat stumble mid-flight, he thought she would use the gun in her other hand and shoot it while it was stationary. It was what he would have done, at least. Jinky, crush it, she ordered. He was confused as to who she gave orders to and got his answer when the whip extended, quickly wrapping around the bat multiple times before squeezing. The monster popped like a balloon. Similar to the ones he killed before, large Japanese characters crisscrossed in the air before disappearing with a chime. That whip is sentient, he wondered. That would explain why it suddenly moved as if it was alive after the woman gave the order. Maybe the other weapon she had was sentient as well. Finished with the bat, the woman and her lion landed on a house's rooftop and Jason questioned how their combined weight didn't break the roof. Next, the hummingbird the size of a small car zipped above her and she shot at it multiple times, but the hummingbird was too quick and moved erratically, not giving her a clear shot. Jason could see the annoyance grow on her face through her furrowed brows and glower at the monster. Jason pondered on whether he should help or stay as a spectator to watch what she would do, and he opted for the latter. But the hummingbird seemingly decided that this wasn't a fight it could win as it suddenly zipped away, making the woman and Jason with the all blades in hand follow it, the latter deciding to tell Wheatley his current actions. Wheatley, the last monster is trying to run away and I'm following it. Notify me if anything happens and I'll come rushing back. Wheatley promptly responds. Roger that. I'll just stay here and make sure no harm comes to Ms. Yashida and that the energy is safely extracted. You go ahead and finish whatever those things are. Alright, but are there more incoming energy signatures? No. Aside from those 4, the other ones seem to have disappeared or got killed before they could get to the house. It's pretty much clear now, but I'll be sure to tell you if anything pops up. Jason thanked Wheatley as he chased the hummingbird, making sure that he stayed behind the woman riding the lion. The woman still made an attempt to shoot it down, but each bullet was dodged by the hummingbird. Minutes later, they were still on its tail, but at this rate, the chase will probably tire the lion out first if he did nothing. He had already noticed the lion slowly decelerating and making rougher pants of air. However, he had been observing the hummingbird's movements ever since the chase began, and despite the bird moving quickly and in an erratic pattern, it always dipped and soared upwards after a specific number of horizontal turns. This will reveal me to the woman, but this chase has gone on long enough, he thought with slight annoyance, and removed the normal black mask in favor of his vigilante mask. Besides, I need information on these monsters and she's the only lead I have on them. As the chase continued, Jason waited, making sure that his calculations were right before the window of opportunity came. As soon as the hummingbird finished its last left turn, Jason leapt high into the air and pulled back his right hand, holding the blade as if it was a spear, and with a twist of his torso, threw the sword into the bird's predicted path with perfect accuracy. The blade pierced the air, crossing dozens of meters in a second, and just as the bird reached the highest it always does when it soared, the blade tore through it without mercy. It exploded and disappeared with a chime, but the sword continued on its path and pierced through a building's wall as if it was paper, with only the handle poking out, and it was only then that Jason landed back on the roof of a house. The sword vanished from the wall and from his hand the instant Jason willed for the blades to disappear. The blonde-haired woman saw this and stopped in place on top of a house. What? Who threw that? Kazuma, report. She and the lion turned back, and they narrowed their eyes at him as soon as they spotted him, standing 2 houses away from them. They made their way over to him, jumping from rooftop to rooftop with surprising nimbleness for a woman riding a lion. The woman landed on the roof he was on just a few meters away from him, and now that he could see her clearly, he immediately noticed a few things. 1. She was shorter than he thought. 2. She had purple eyes with slitted pupils, so she was definitely not human, or was maybe a metahuman of some kind. 3. She was quite beautiful and curvaceous. Enough to actually rival someone like the Black Canary, in his opinion. She stared at him with suspicion and asked, "Masked man, you were the one who threw that sword, right? Who are you?" Jason crossed his arms. "Where I come from. You introduce yourself first before asking for someone's name." She merely stared in response before she dismounted the lion. With no rider on his back anymore, the lion sat down with its front paws standing, and Jason felt as if he was being observed by it through its eyes that gleamed with intelligence. "I am Bishamon." She stepped closer to him. "I came here after detecting an abnormal, sudden emergence of multiple phantoms during the daytime. It's been happening more frequently lately." Bishamon. Like the god, Bishamontan? Is that related to her magical weapons? It likely is. And those monsters from before are called phantoms, huh? Good to know, Jason thought. The woman aimed her handgun, a pink 6-chamber revolver, at his head. "But first, answer my question. Who or what are you? I know you're not a god, because all gods know of each other. You don't seem to be a regalia either, and neither was the sword you used to kill that phantom. That leaves the humans. But to my knowledge, what you just did is something no human should be able to do." "You're right. I'm not a god or regalia," he answered, evading her question. "Though I guess I'm not a normal human either. Answer me properly. Remove that mask of yours as well." She emphasized her threat by uncoiling the whip in her other hand. What should he do? Tell her the truth, a half-truth, or a complete lie? He could feel the tension in the air as he contemplated the battle that would come if the latter two led to a fight. As of this moment, he lacked information about her, her strength, and the world itself. And if what she said and the implications of it were true, she was a god and other gods existed. Aside from that, it seemed like the phantoms were a normal occurrence here and wasn't something too uncommon. Saki still had that energy inside her, and it'll take more than half a day to extract completely, according to Wheatley. If more of those things were to become attracted to her, he'll have to deal with them, and knowing their strengths and their weaknesses is a whole lot better than knowing jack shit. Oh well, it's not like his identity was important in this world anyway. No one knew him. With an irritated sigh, Jason undid the straps of his mask, revealing his face. He stored the mask inside the ring, not caring if she saw. Jason crossed his arms, making eye contact with her. "Call me Jason. So, is this good enough?" Bishamon didn't reply. Her hold on her gun faltered, and she stared at him with slightly blushing cheeks before she caught herself and shook her head. Her calm expression returned, yet the blush remained, and she still had the gun aimed at him. "Why yes. But if you're human, how are you able to see me? Wait, am I not supposed to see you? As far as I know, there is not a single adult human that can see beings of the far shore under normal circumstances. However, it seems you're an exception. Then what makes him the exception? Furthermore, he should maybe throw her off in an effort to lessen her hostility and make himself less of an enemy." Jason shrugged his shoulders with a charming smile while maintaining eye contact. "That's not too bad. At least I get to meet a beautiful woman like you." It seemed to work. The blush on her face burned a shade brighter. Also, he continued. I have no idea what the far shore even is. You're gonna have to explain it to me. You don't know? Then how? She trailed off with a confused expression and finally put down her gun. The far shore is what you would call the world of the non-living. Gods such as me and the phantoms you encountered reside there. I thought you would know of this already with how you already possess a weapon capable of killing a phantom. That weapon of mine is supposed to only affect magical beings, but I guess I should add spirits to the list as well. Tell me, would I be correct to assume that you call the world of the living the near shore? That's correct. Humans and beings from the far shore reside in the same plane of existence, but like I said before, humans normally aren't able to perceive beings from the far shore. Despite me saying that, phantoms are able to exist on the near shore alongside humans and feed off of the darkness inside them and corrupt the good in their heart, she said. Jason frowned. I see. Could you tell me their weaknesses and strengths? Unfortunately, they have no specific weaknesses since each phantom is unique and can take on many forms. The only way to kill them is to use a regalia, or at least, that was what I thought before seeing your sword. As for strengths, they can negatively influence your emotions and thoughts if you're weak-willed and are not in a good emotional and mental state. That was bad news. Now he really should go back and protect Saki while the energy is extracted from her. If he was right, the energy inside Saki was a beacon that drew them like moths to a flame. Jason bowed his head to her. Thanks for answering my questions. Is there anything else you need from me? I have an appointment I have to get to. Bishamon paused for a moment and looked back at the lion. Based on her body language and the way they looked at each other, it seemed like they were having a mental conversation. Telepathy. Jason wondered. Seconds later, she turned her head back towards Jason. Do you have a phone? Jason blinked in surprise. Yeah. You want my contact details? I have more questions for you, so having a way to contact you would be convenient, and it would be rude of me to occupy your time when you have important matters to attend to. Just like that, they exchanged contact details. There you go, said Jason as he pocketed his phone. Thank you. She nodded in thanks and looked down at her phone for a moment. With this, you'll be able to. She trailed off as Jason had already disappeared without a trace when she looked up. How did he do that? Chapter 11, I'll be waiting. From behind the house next to the one Bishamon was on, Jason could clearly hear her baffled voice. How did he do that? Kazuma, can you detect him anywhere? She paused for a moment and now he could confirm that she was telepathically communicating with someone who was giving her information through unknown means because no one in the nearby vicinity replied to her. No, that's impossible. First, your accuracy ability didn't work properly on the phantoms and now you're telling me you can't even track a human. She let out a tired sigh. I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. It's just that lately, these new empowered phantoms are becoming more of a threat as time goes on and I'm almost at the end of my rope. Phantoms are starting to emerge even in the middle of the day, and I'm sure the others are also worried by this. The others. She must be talking about the other gods. Let's go. There are still more phantoms emerging elsewhere and I might have a new lead on that bastard, Yato. Jason could hear the deep hatred in her voice when she mentioned this Yato person. After the rustling of clothes and a low rumble from the lion, he heard the sound produced by their movements as they moved farther away slowly become faint until it disappeared completely. Jason wondered who this Yato person was and his intuition was telling him it was a god. But what did they do to earn the complete animosity of Bishamon? He shook his head clear. For now, his priority was ensuring that Saki stayed safe while Wheatley extracted the energy from her. Wheatley had not contacted him about anything, so there didn't seem to be any danger near them for now, but he wasn't counting on things being quiet for long. Without further delay, he leapt onto a roof and sprinted back to the Saki's house. Third person POV. In Saki's room, Saki stayed huddled in her blanket, staring blankly at the ground. Her thoughts were muddled. She couldn't remove the disgusting feeling of her father touching her inappropriately, as well as the lustful look in his eyes as he did so. A look no father should ever give to their child. What about her mother? How would she react to this? Above her, Wheatley, still in his invisible state, floated in silence as he extracted the energy from Saki, dark tendrils of energy connecting them to each other. It surprised him that the amount inside her was far more than the old man Jason had killed, but that explains why it was taking so long to extract the energy. Even when extracting at a speed that would keep her alive, it shouldn't take more than half a day to do it if he used the amount he extracted from the old man as a baseline. Wheatley inquisitively narrowed his eyes at her. Maybe she's special in some way. Joe did say that there are those with unique qualities in this world. As his train of thought reached that point, the scream of a woman from the first floor reached them. Honey, what happened? Who did this? If Wheatley could sweat, he would start sweating right about now. Oh, it sounds like someone found the father. Sending the last part to Jason, he finished. Someone's inside the house and found the father's body. You, might want to come back. Jason replied, damn, it's probably her mother. Don't worry, I'll be there in around half a minute. Phew, thank goodness, then. He did not want to be the one to deal with the mother, who is quite likely looking for whoever beat up the father of her child. The woman screamed again. Saki, where are you? As if her name was a signal, Saki twitched at the mention of her name and looked up. She unraveled the blanket before quickly walking to the door and opening it with a hopeful and relieved expression. Her mother was here. Wheatley followed above her. He wouldn't want to have the connection be cut off, now would he? When she reached the floor below, her father was on the floor with no pants and tied up by a rope that her mother was trying to untie with sweat and frustration on her face. Saki rushed to her mother as tears started to flow and tightly hugged her from behind. Mom. Her mother turned around in surprise and returned the hug with relief filling her. Saki, you're safe? Wait, are you okay? Why are you crying? Saki tightened her hug on her mother in response. It was Dad. He suddenly came into my room after you left and started touching me in weird places. He even tried kissing me? I was so scared. Are you sure? She couldn't believe such a thing could happen. Saki furiously nodded her head, her hold on her mother and the quivering of her body only strengthening. Her mother's eyes widened in shock after she heard this, and she looked back at her husband who was still tied up behind her with disbelief. But that would also explain why he was half naked. Then were you the one who tied your father up? Saki shook her head. A really big man came into the house and saved me. He said he heard my screams from outside our house. She paused, knowing what would have happened if he wasn't there. If he wasn't there to stop Dad. SHH. Her mother shushed before cradling Saki's head and soothingly rubbing circles on her back. It's okay now. It's okay. She spent a long moment continuing her actions before asking, do you know where that man went? Saki shook her head silently. But she at least now knew why her husband was tied up in rope and who did it. I see. Her mother sighed, continuing to reassure her daughter that it was okay now and holding her gently. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang. Her mother stood up to answer the door, but Saki tightly gripped her arm and wouldn't let go. She looked back at her daughter, who merely looked at her with desperation in her eyes. Understanding what her daughter wanted, she slowly pulled her daughter up with a reassuring smile and walked with her to the door. As they walked, Saki held her arm as if she was afraid that she would disappear if she let go. When they opened the door, they were shocked by what they saw. A man of large size wearing a black hoodie, gray sweatpants, and rubber shoes who towered over them. A black face mask covered the lower half of his face, but his deep blue eyes were mesmerizing, and even with half of his face covered, they could tell that he was an exceedingly attractive man. Saki was surprised by all this. When she first saw him, she didn't notice all these things because she was still in shock at what happened. Now, all she could do was stare in silence. Really big is an accurate description of him, the mother thought. Her mother gulped and shakily adjusted her hair, slightly intimidated by a man of such size. Hello there. Am I right to assume that you're the one who saved my daughter? She tried giving him a friendly smile. Jason nodded. He could easily tell the mother was intimidated by him by the spike in heart rate and her body language. Better be gentle, then. I am. Is your daughter all right? She was in a terrible state after I stopped her dad from doing anything to her. Surprised by how deep and soothing his voice sounded, she replied, oh, she's still processing what happened, but she's doing better now. She bowed deeply. Thank you so much for saving my daughter. If it wasn't for you, something worse would have happened to my daughter. As her mother, you have my sincere gratitude. Following her mother, Saki bowed as well, but in a more subdued manner. Thank you very much for saving me. Please, stand up. I was only doing what I thought was right. Speaking of which, is her father still unconscious? They both straightened and looked at each other momentarily. Yes. He's still unconscious on the living room floor, the mother answered. That's good. You should call the police and tell them what had happened. I know it may not be my place to say this, but that man needs to be punished for what he had done, Jason said with a resolute expression. You're right. Saki's mother had a look of resignation as she turned her head back. I don't know why my husband would do it, but what he did is unacceptable. Please stay here while I call the police. She gently pried off her daughter's hands before kissing her forehead with a smile. After that, she headed inside while dialing the police, leaving Saki behind. I know I asked this already, but are you alright, kid? Jason looked at Saki who had begun looking at the floor with great interest. She slightly nodded her head. He hummed. He knew how to take her mind off things. Hey, he called out, and she looked at him from behind her bangs. Wanna hear a story? He could see her eyes light up with curiosity, so he began to tell a story on the spot. It was a made-up one. A story about a girl who had 0 friends and had social anxiety, but overcame those obstacles after first making one friend, and then another, until she had a close group of friends whom she trusted. The man's voice was soothing to Saki, her mind becoming lost in the story. The story resonated with her as it reminded her of her own struggles with not having any friends. She had to teach herself how to do makeup and style her hair in order to fit in and hopefully make friends at school when it starts in a few weeks. When the story finally ended, it left her wanting for more. Please continue the story, she pleaded with no trace of the sadness from before in her expression. Jason shook his head with a wry smile. Sorry, but it seems like we've run out of time to do that. Your mother is done calling the police and is heading this way. He didn't think she would get this hooked on the story he made up on the spot to cheer her up. Sorry that took so long. The police are headed this way to arrest my husband. That's good. Jason nodded. Well, it seems like I'm not needed here anymore, so I'll just get on my way. You have my best wishes. Oh, and here's some money to repair the door. I kicked it down as I was trying to save your daughter. He gave a stack of cash to Saki's mother, who accepted it gratefully. Oh my, I honestly forgot about that. Thank you. With everything done, Jason turned around and walked away, but before he could walk past the gate, he heard a shout from behind. Mister, Will you come back to tell me a story again? Jason turned his head back in surprise before his eyes crinkled into a smile. He nodded. Of course. I'll have a better story prepared next time. It'll also be a convenient way to check up on her without being creepy or making an excuse, making this a win-win situation. Saki's eyes lit up with joy, and a small smile formed on her face. I'll be waiting. Chapter 12, The Hunt Begins. After pretending to leave, Jason stayed nearby to monitor the situation. Wheatley was still inside with the mother-daughter duo and was acting as his eyes and ears. Minutes after he had left, the police arrived in a black and white car that had the word police on the sides, and he watched from a nearby house's rooftop as one of the two police officers went inside to retrieve Saki's father while the other talked with Saki and her mother. From where he was standing, he heard the entire conversation clearly. The police had asked for details regarding what happened, and when he became the topic of conversation, the officer questioned them what they knew about him. Of course, they couldn't tell the officer much. All they knew about him was his appearance, what he did to their father/husband, and that he was a simple stranger who heard her screams and helped. This is because during the conversation Jason had with them, he controlled the conversation so that it was mostly about them and the situation. There was no need to be so cautious, but he knew the police would ask about him, and he didn't want to deal with the trouble that would have come with that. He was a complete ghost in this world. Not a single government here had data or any information on him, so that meant any form of a search for information about him will lead only to them asking questions. If he had stayed to wait for the police and the police figured out that he wasn't in their system, Jason frowned at the thought. He'd rather stay off the grid. From his experience with governments in general, they didn't like it when they didn't have information or control over a dangerous individual within their governance. So for now, he wasn't planning on giving any government any semblance of control over him anytime soon. After asking more questions about Jason and receiving not a single answer to any of them, the police officer stopped, shoved his notepad inside his pocket, and went inside. From his body language, Jason could tell that he was slightly frustrated by the fruitless interrogation. A moment later, both officers came out, dragging the still unconscious, but thankfully completely clothed, body of Saki's father. The rope that was used to immobilize him was nowhere to be seen, and a pair of handcuffs restrained his arms. The old man still asleep, huh? Probably threw him with too much force, but he deserved it. Jason scoffed. Saki had shut her eyes and looked away from her father as she held her mother while her mother stared at her husband with a mix of rage, confusion, and sadness on her face. The officers put their father/husband in the back seat and drove off after tipping their hats to the mother-daughter duo, who watched the car until they could no longer see it. With that business done, both of them went back inside. Jason jumped and silently landed on top of their house's rooftop. Wheatley, how's the extraction so far? It's going well so far, but it's not speeding up at all, unfortunately. Still gonna have to wait for more than half a day, Wheatley commented. Oh, and by the way, I just did a scan and more of those things from before are headed this way. A pair of blades flashed into existence within Jason's palms. Tendrils of red electricity ran up and down the blades. I'll take care of those. Just focus on the extraction. Jason's lips curved up in anticipation. He still hadn't fully tested out his current physical capabilities, so having some enemies he could go all out on was an opportunity he wouldn't waste. As if on cue, a gigantic yellow bear with razor-sharp teeth and claws, covered by the dark energy, stumped towards the house. Jason waved at the bear. Hey Winnie the Pooh. Sorry, but we're all out of honey. Maybe if you come back tomorrow, you'll get some. The bear roared at him in response. No, that's a shame, cause this isn't going to end well for you. In one smooth motion, Jason tossed both blades into the air, making them spin, and stepped off of the roof, landing on the ground with barely a bend in his knees before holding both hands out, catching the falling blades. He rose to his full size, his feet firmly planted on the ground and his breath steady. He waved his sword in a beckoning motion with a wide smirk on his face. Come get some. Moonlight peeked through the gaps between the dark clouds covering most of the moon. For hours, Jason had killed any phantom that came to the house, and when day turned into night, the amount of phantoms that popped up increased tremendously. However, he found this to be no issue. Even when he started fighting groups of 2, 3, or more, his body did not tire. In fact, he merely likened it to a warm-up at that point, and he had quickly gotten used to fighting phantoms despite the large variety they had. To him, the phantoms were just bigger, fluorescent-colored animals. Even the dinosaurs and aliens he'd killed in the past were more deadly. But it should be that way since he was now stronger, faster, more agile, and more durable than his previous self. Now, no matter the size or type of phantom that came, they weren't able to touch or even graze him if he didn't let them. Jason stabbed the sword behind his shoulder without looking, piercing through the center of the floating dog's wide-open jaw. The phantom vanished after a chime. And that's one more. That was the 57th phantom of the day. Just as he was about to go hunting for more phantoms nearby, Wheatley's voice echoed in his mind. Jason, I have good news. The extraction's finally done. Really? That's good. The blades disappeared from his hands. Return and download any new information you have into my mind. Roger that. He felt Wheatley return and a stream of information flowed from him and into his head. Wheatley had extracted far more energy from Saki than the old man he had eliminated. 100 times more energy, to be precise, which was good progress towards being able to track the source in this world. Despite Joe closing the portal that leaked the energy, there was still something in this world producing it. Furthermore, based on Saki's memories, her father started acting strange around her around the time after he had killed the old man, which was last night, and he really only took action when her mother left, leaving him and Saki alone in the house. Does that mean our actions from last night triggered something? There isn't anything else that could explain why Saki had been possessed by the energy so suddenly. There was also that comment from Bishamon about the number of phantoms increasing and becoming empowered. But why would all those be triggered by killing one man? Right. Why would that happen? Unless, of course, remember what you and Joe said about the energy only coming from something primordial or a god? Yeah. Where are you going with Tio? I see now, Wheatley nervously said. Please tell me our actions didn't disturb and catch the attention of whatever being leaked that energy. That's precisely what I think happened. It would explain the spike and spread of dark energy, but I don't think we'll have to worry about that being coming for us because we'd probably be dead by now without even knowing how we died if that happened, Jason concluded. Phew. And all is right in the world again. Well, not really, but you get my point. So what are your plans now, Jason? Jason leapt to a rooftop and began making his way towards the city by sprinting. I don't know for sure yet what my plans are, but there's one person I want to find today. He still remembered the face of the man that approached Saki in Joe's vision of the future. Within Tokyo, Jason sat on a table inside a cafe with a slice of chocolate cake and a cup of coffee next to his WayneTech laptop. He sat in a corner of the cafe, eating his cake as he used the combination of Tokyo's surveillance system which he accessed through illegal means and his own facial recognition software to find the man in the vision Joe showed him. Based on his memory, he had created an accurate 3D rendered image of the guy's face for his software to search for. Now, all he had to do was wait. If he were able to use the Batcave's supercomputer, this would have only taken a few seconds at most, but the WayneTech laptop he had was no slouch and was probably still better than any modern computer in this day and age, only surpassed by existing supercomputers. As Jason waited, he thought about what he was planning to do after this. Aside from clearing up the anomalies and finishing his business with the man in the vision, he had nothing else to do. Maybe he could continue what he couldn't finish in Gotham and clean up the streets, but this wasn't Gotham. There was no Joker, Penguin, Riddler, or any of the supervillains. And he couldn't go spar with Dick or the others anymore. They would usually welcome a good fight in order to train or to just spend time with each other when they were on good terms. Jason drank one last sip of the bitter coffee before putting it down with a sigh. I wonder where my life will lead to now that Gotham doesn't exist. It had been his #1 goal to clean Gotham of the filth lurked in the dark, but now, there was no way he'll be able to fulfill that goal. He had no one to talk to anymore, and without Wheatley, he would have been all alone. As he took a bite out of the slice of chocolate cake, the screen suddenly flashed with a positive confirmation. Looks like you found him. With one look, he memorized the details of where and when the man was last detected by the surveillance system, stored his laptop, and ran out of the cafe, but not before shoving what was left of the delicious cake in his mouth. It was time to hunt a rat. Chapter 13, Retribution. Third-person POV. Late at night within one of Tokyo's red light districts. People bustled on the streets of Roppongi, one of Tokyo's red light districts, creating a lively atmosphere. As one would expect from one of Tokyo's red light districts, it is a hotspot of shady business dealings and people. Most notoriously, it is where the city's Yakuza operates, which makes it one of the most dangerous areas to go to as a tourist and as a native. In one of Roppongi's streets, Jason weaved through the crowd of people with the hood of his black hoodie and black mask obscuring his face. He towered over everyone, yet it was as if he was merely a ghost to the surrounding people who didn't even notice his presence. However, he had already gotten used to it. He was currently searching the crowd for the man in his vision. If the vision was accurate and if the man hadn't completely changed his look, he should have long, bright orange hair and had piercings in his ears. He was also of average height for a man in Japan. Jason frowned since he was searching for a couple minutes now and he still had not spotted him anywhere. According to his laptop, this area should be where he was last spotted by Tokyo's surveillance system. But if he wasn't outside, then he should be in one of the establishments, or maybe he knew where the blind spots of the surveillance system were. Either way, he was wasting time. He needed to expand his search area. Wheatley, you need my help. Wheatley replied immediately. Yeah. Enter stealth mode and search around the area for a man with this appearance. He sent the mental image of the man to Wheatley, who received it. Wheatley hummed. All right. Are you going to look for him inside all these places? Where else will I look for? Jason replied while entering a club with bright signs outside. I know his type, and if I'm right, he probably has connections to the suppliers of the drugs he has on him. So if I find him, I'll be able to find the ones supplying him. AHH. I didn't think of that. All right, I'll start looking for him. Wheatley left his soul and went outside to search before the bar door could close. Inside, bright lights and loud music flooded the club like a rave. The place was packed with people, but he merely weaved through the crowd of people until he reached the bar. He removed his face mask, but kept the hood on. Jason sat on one chair and tapped the shoulder of the bartender that was wiping a glass cup. The barista stopped and blinked in confusion when he looked at Jason. Sorry about that, sir. Didn't notice you there. He put down the glass with an apologetic smile. So, what can I do for you? Jason placed a 10,000 yen bill on the table. Get me a bottle of the strongest drink you have. And keep the change. The bartender nodded and went to get his drink. When he came back, he placed a bottle of beer on the table. Here you go. Is there anything else you want, sir? Jason nodded and pulled out his phone from his pocket. He turned it on before showing the realistic 3D render of the man's face to the bartender. Do you know this guy? The bartender blinked before his eyes lit up in recognition and he nodded. I know him. He used to be a regular here, but he hasn't showed up in a while. Are you looking for him? Yeah. Know where I can find him. Jason pocketed his phone and opened the bottle with his thumb, flicking the bottle top away. He chugged half of it in one go. The bartender crossed his arms in thought before answering with a cunning look in his eyes. I think I remember him mentioning this new bar a street or two away from here. But I can't seem to remember. Before he could finish his sentence, 20,000 yen was placed on the table. The bartender took it with a smirk on his face before telling him the exact location, a name, and a description of the place. Jason finished the other half left in the bottle and slammed it on the table. Thanks for the info. Pleasure doing business with you. With the transaction finished, he left the club without delay. Third-person POV. Is this the place? Wheatley asked as he hovered behind Jason in stealth mode. Jason stood outside a staircase that led below the ground. In front of him was the sign with the name of the bar the bartender told him about. This is the location the bartender told me. The surveillance system hasn't detected him leaving the area, so he should still be in there. And if the bastard lied, he'll come to know what it means to eat a knuckle sandwich. Jason walked down the poorly lit stairs until he reached the door at the bottom. He didn't open it immediately and listened first. Inside, a large man with dark skin and of African descent stood with crossed arms behind the counter as he talked to a lanky man with long, orange hair and was of average height. Hey Hayato. When the hell are you going to pay me back, huh? It's been a month, and so far, you haven't paid back a single yen. Do you take me for a joke? Look, I'm working on it, Obata, Hayato replied, taking a sip from his beer. Outside, Jason's lips slightly curled up. Found you? Yeah, well, you better get that money soon, because if you don't. John uncrossed his arms and gripped the wooden counter. The wood creaked as if it was about to break. Jason could hear Hayato gulp and he could somehow smell the fear. Strange. Why yeah, don't worry. I'll have the money by next week. Promise. He took a larger gulp this time and wiped the beer with his sleeve. He needed to find an easy bitch he could make money off of. Do you have more of those aphrodisiac pills? Tisk. You haven't even paid off last month's tab and you want to add more. Obata's patience was already running thin, and this bastard had the audacity to ask for more. Just give me one. And you know I've paid off all my other debts before, he said with a smirk. Come on, man. Just one. That's all I'm asking. Obata grit his teeth and was in thought. What Hayato said about having paid off all his debts before was true, but it was still risky for him because if he gets caught and the cops trace it back to him, he'll need to move again. That'll cost him too much money that he didn't have. What to do? What to do? Fuck it. Obata scratched the back of neck in annoyance. Fine. But if you don't pay me back in time, it won't be just a bone or two that'll be broken. Hayato watched with a smirk on his face as Obata crouched down to get a small bottle filled with pills that had the shape of a heart in the middle. Obata grabbed one pill before storing the bottle again. He opened the hand that had the pill and Hayato extended his own to grab it, but before he could, Obata closed his hand and glared at him. Last warning. Don't take me for a joke. Kappas. Hey man. When did I ever do that? Never, that's what. With everything done, Obata finally opened his hand and Hayato went to grab it again, but before he could, the door slammed open. Because of the sudden slam, Obata pulled back his hand. They turned their heads to see who it was that interrupted them, only to see a hooded and masked man, even bigger and taller than Obata. Hey, said Obata as he looked at Jason with suspicion. Can't you read the sign outside? The bar's closed for the night. Come back tomorrow. Jason didn't answer, and his cold eyes scanned the room and he discreetly locked the door behind him. The smell of drugs being used here before was clear to his sense of smell. Jason noted everything else he could sense before finally locking onto Hayato. He finally got to see the man that would have assaulted Saki in the future. A chill suddenly went down Hayato's spine and he felt goosebumps all over his body. His body was screaming at him to move, but no matter what he did, it was like his limbs were paralyzed. All he could do was freeze and have cold sweat run down his face. So, you're the one, Jason muttered menacingly, walking towards Hayato who had gotten control over his body again and had fallen off of the chair in a stumble with sweat pouring down his face. Obata watched in bewilderment. What the fuck? You good, Hayato? Do you know this guy? And no, man. I have no clue who this fucker is. He shouted with a trembling voice while crawling away from Jason. Hey you, who the hell are you? The hell do you want from me? Hayato knew he had done a lot of shitty things to a lot of people. The majority of them young girls he took advantage of. He used and threw them away like dirty tissue. But that can't be it, right? He made sure that most of the ones he targeted didn't have boyfriends. Jason stayed silent. The tension in the air was palpable as the stranger steadily moved closer to Hayato, who could only see the ominous shadow of a bat behind the man. What in the actual fuck? Obata, seeing that the stranger wasn't friendly, jumped over the counter and gripped his shoulder. You better back off before oof. Before he could even finish his sentence, he was pushed with so much force that he crashed into the chairs and the counter behind him. Ugh. Obata shook his head clear and looked up with blurry, but pissed, eyes. Hayato looked at him slack-jawed, while the stranger wasn't even looking at him. This fucker's dangerous. I didn't even see him shove me. Hayato saw his expression and realized what was about to happen. He quickly began crawling towards the door. Jason let him. He won't be able to escape, anyway. You. Obata stood up and charged at Jason. You're gonna pay for that, motherfucker. He expected the man to move or put his fists up, but he just stood there. Suit yourself, idiot. Jason calmly waited until the right moment before his left hand shot up like a cobra and gripped Obata's throat like a steel clamp. Ack. Jason effortlessly lifted him into the air, and no matter if Obata kicked, clawed, or punched, the grip on his throat stayed strong. Whatever Obata tried hurt himself more than it did Jason. Obata's nails couldn't pierce his skin, and his punches and kicks felt more like light taps. Please. I give up. Obata choked out, tapping the man's arm in surrender. He regretted ever trying to interfere with this monster's business. He even doubted he was human. Behind them, Hayato attempted to pull the door open after unlocking it, but it was as if the door was soldered shut. Unbeknownst to him, there was a mechanical arm made of solid light holding the door from outside, preventing it from opening. Come on, open up, Hayato muttered anxiously. Suddenly, a shadow covered him and he hurriedly turned around, only to have Obata's body crash onto him. They both fell to the ground in a pile, groaning in pain. Jason approached them and crouched, holding 2 handguns with silencers. You wanted to know who I was, right? Well, let's just say I'm a janitor. Janitor? Do you work for the Yakuza or something? Hayato asked, looking at the guns with fear in his eyes. Do you want money? I don't want anything from you. Jason stood up and aimed 1 gun at each head. I'm just taking out the trash. Minutes later, Jason sat on a chair inspecting the aphrodisiac pill while Wheatley hovered over the bodies of the 2. It's a shame that they weren't possessed by dark primordial energy. Not everyone does shitty things because of some malevolent god influencing them. I know you don't have much experience with dealing with humans, but trust me, I've killed guys even worse than them, and there are more of them out there than you'd think. Placed on the counter next to him was his laptop, extracting data from the 3 phones he retrieved from their pockets. 1 from Hayato and 2 from Obata. The data on each phone was currently being copied onto his laptop, including the contact details, text messages, call history, everything. After copying it onto his laptop, he'll copy the evidence of their crimes onto a USB for the police to find along with most of the illegal drugs. With all this data, he should be able to take down the people involved in this possible drug ring. Next to his laptop were small and large zip-locked bags of cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and multiple bottles of the aphrodisiac drug. He was curious about the drug because if it was true to its namesake, it's most likely something used on women. However, his train of thought was broken as moments later, the data was done extracting. After that, he had copied all the evidence on the USB for the police. They'll be here a few minutes from now. Maybe he'll leave a calling card of sorts as well, to leave his mark and to begin establishing his presence. As for his next course of action, well, like he said before, it's time to take out the trash. Chapter 14, Run. Early noon. In a tall apartment within Tokyo, a certain idol lived with her 2 managers and her children. Ai, Miyako, come look at the TV, quick. Ai, a beautiful girl with gradient-colored eyes and blue-purplish hair, stopped playing with her children and turned around, curious about the fuss. Huh? What's got you so worked up, Seto-san? Close. It's Seto. Never mind, forget that. Just look at the TV and you'll see why. Because her mother stopped playing with her, the 4-year-old child with blonde hair and ruby eyes pouted, crossing her arms. What's showing on the TV that's so interesting, anyway? I wanna be pampered by mama more. The boy with blonde hair and aquamarine eyes beside her indifferently replied, with how interested Seto-san is, it might be related to her work. In that case, I wanna see. Come on. The little girl jumped off the bed and followed her mother out of the bedroom. Since he had nothing better to do, the boy shrugged and followed as well. Within the living room, the mother sat on the sofa, patting the head of her daughter on her lap and her son next to her. Meanwhile, Seto-san, her manager, sat on the mat with a beer in hand. His wife, Miyako, stood close by. All of them were unnerved by the news on the TV. Today, police are investigating a shocking double murder that was discovered yesterday evening. Authorities responded to an anonymous tip that led them to an underground bar within Roppongi. Upon arrival, police found the bodies of 2 individuals, both of whom had been shot once in the head with what seems to be an unidentified handgun. The victims have been identified as Hayato Nobuyuki and Masaru Obata, both males in their mid-20s. At this time, authorities have not released any further details about the victims. Within the bar, police found a pile of illegal drugs including cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and multiple bottles of the new aphrodisiac drug that has been circulating worldwide gathered on a table. It is unknown how the drugs are related to the suspect and the victims. Furthermore, a hard drive labeled as evidence has been found on the site, and is the only thing police have found that may lead them to a suspect. Aside from the hard drive, police are currently combing the scene for more evidence that may lead them to a suspect or suspects. They are currently checking the surveillance camera within the area to determine a potential lead on the suspect. So far, no weapon has been recovered, and no motive for the crime has been determined. People in the area were shaken by the news, with some expressing concerns for their safety. It's just scary to think that something like this could happen so close to home, said one resident. Anyone with information about this crime is urged to come forward and contact the authorities. We will continue to bring you updates on this developing story as more information becomes available. Reporting for Tokyo Today News, I'm Noriko Sato. Back to you in the studio. They all stayed silent for a moment and digested the news. Man, a double murder. That's the first time I've ever heard of one happening in Tokyo, Seta-san commented with raised eyebrows. He was surprised since a lot of the crimes that happen in Tokyo are either small ones like theft or scams. Crimes like the double murder are rarely featured in the news. This just means we have to be more careful, AI said with a bright, reassuring smile on her face. She hugged her children tight. Don't worry, Ruby, Aquamarine. Mama will protect you both. Miyako raised her hand to her cheek and sighed. And just as I was about to go night shopping, too, she turned to her husband. Is this gonna affect any of Bikomaka's or AI's work? You know they have Tokyo Dome in a few days. Seta waved his hand back and forth nonchalantly. Don't worry, don't worry. Their work might get affected, but not that much. More precautions and a couple of schedule adjustments might be necessary, though. For now, just as AI said, everyone should be more cautious. Next to AI, her toddler's face was tense, his brow furrowed in contemplation. He was glad that the area of the crime wasn't anywhere near their apartment, but the knowledge that someone had killed 2 people in cold blood and was still at large was a concerning thought. What are you thinking so hard about? His sister asked while receiving head pats from their mother. He paused and shook his head. It's nothing. Jason used the data extracted from the phones to locate and gather information on anyone Hayato or Obata associated with. For 36 hours, he used the data and dedicated himself to taking down the drug ring, traveling from district to district. Before he traveled, he had memorized the entire city's layout after looking at its map on the internet. It was far bigger than Gotham City, but he had no issue memorizing each district, all the street addresses, and the important landmarks. The actual process of moving around Tokyo City only let him further get a lay of the land. As Jason dealt with the drug ring, he killed the ones who dealt with kids and inflicted such severe torture on the others, they can never function as normal members of society ever again. Regrettably, some of the drug dealers were just teenagers who got roped into it or were coerced into doing it by someone older than them. There were many instances where Wheatley would detect anomalies related to the dark energy as they traveled. In those instances, they'd always track it down and fix the source. So far, he's dealt with phantoms, blackmailers, and child. In many of the cases, blackmailers used their blackmail to force the women to comply with their demands like non-consensual sex. He killed every single one of them without mercy. Many of them were obese men with horrendous appearances, and he'd taken a liking to calling them ugly bastards. Jason was sickened because some of them were even related to the ones they targeted. However, sometimes, he was already too late. Majority of the targets were female, and when he got to the ones who had already become victims, they had already been possessed by the energy, turning them into sex-crazed maniacs who could only think of sex. Of course, Wheatley would extract the energy, but the damage had already been done to their bodies and minds. Filled with rage and frustration, he lamented the fact that he was powerless to help them. All he could do was call the proper authorities and let them handle the situation afterwards. In an abandoned house on the outskirts of Tokyo, many unconscious bodies littered the floor. A few, however, had bullet holes in their head or in their chest. Please, I have a family, the thug begged on his knees with tearful eyes as he looked at the man standing in front of him, holding a gun to his head. Nice try. You're a decent actor, but you're not fooling me. Jason pulled the trigger, and the man fell forward, blood slowly pooling around his head. The man's name was Isao Takano, a notorious drug dealer in this area. He had a wife and 2 kids, true, but it seemed like he forgot he killed them with his own hands. After killing his family and evading authorities, he began dealing drugs. And that's that. The handgun vanished from his hand, returning into the ring. Wheatley. Calling card, coming right up. Wheatley manifested himself, projecting a hologram in the shape of a palm-sized card that quickly solidified. Wheatley had a very useful function called material forging, which allowed him to create anything up to a certain size as long as Jason gave him the required visual image and material and chemical composition/blueprint of the object he wanted. Weapons, ammunition, gadgets, protective equipment, or clothes can be made as long as they don't exceed the size limit. Theoretically, he could make his own custom vehicle using it. This is probably one of Wheatley's most useful functions. Now I won't have to find a supplier and manufacturer for all my equipment or have to make them myself, since Wheatley could just do it for me. It'll be efficient too since he could make anything with no mistakes or changes in quality. A second later, the card was finished, dropping into his hand. He placed it on the back of the man he just shot. I've placed one of these every time I cleared an area. The police and media must be going crazy over all these killings, he mused. I'd be terrified if I was in their position. Well, they won't like it, but I know I've helped them confiscate at least 2,500 kilograms, 5,512 pounds in freedom units, worth of illegal drugs across all these solo operations. If anything, they should thank me. Then again, I did run out of leads to other drug dealers. They started hiding like rats because of me. Well, you can't blame them. If an assassin specifically targeting drug dealers was on the loose, what else could they do? Jason found no fault in that logic. As he turned to the window he was about to jump out of, he heard the strange sounds of babies cheering. What's that? What's what? Jason turned towards the sound and noticed a phone lying on the ground next to an unconscious man. Wheatley followed him as he went closer and picked it up. What the hell was this guy watching? It was a video of two babies with blonde hair. The one on the left had aquamarine eyes, while the one on the right had ruby eyes. Both babies were waving a pair of glowing sticks around in some sort of pattern not unlike a dance while making cheering sounds. Baby humans? Oh, let me see. Wheatley hovered over his shoulder excitedly. Oh, they're absolutely adorable. Oh wow, what? Jason asked, curious about why Wheatley would suddenly exclaim in surprise, and before Wheatley could answer, the video showed how a beautiful girl with purplish blue hair dressed in a colorful costume smiling at the baby's dance. Oh, wow, Wheatley exclaimed again. Jason's brow twitched in annoyance. Are you gonna explain why you're wowing or not? How should I say this? I can see the dark energy, even through a video, and the babies, they are absolutely covered in dark energy. The girl is an even worse case. It's like she's wearing a cloak made of tar. What? Jason said with gritted teeth. If babies are being targeted by he'll find that bastard and skin him alive. Are you sure? It's true? Strangely, the energy seems to focus around their eyes. Also, is it normal for humans to have stars in their eyes? No, it's not. But he didn't see any stars in their eyes, so it must be related to the dark energy and its effects on them. Jason quickly pulled out his phone, checking the details of the video, and found it's an old video from a few years ago that got viral on social media. A few years ago. Was he already too late? Next, he tried checking their identities, but he found not a single piece of information about the babies. Thankfully, the girl wasn't the same. The girl's name was AI Hoshino. She's currently turning 20 years old and was around 17 years old by the time the video was uploaded. She's a popular idol who's a part of the idol group called Bikomaki, which explains why she was in the video. Relief flooded him. She's still alive. That's good. That means the babies. Wait, they're toddlers now. They're probably still alive as well. With his mind made up, Jason wasted no time. Wheatley returned to his soul, and he dialed the police, letting them know the address of the abandoned building, before he jumped out the window. From the second floor, he landed on the street below with no issue and rushed back towards the city at full speed, running at 129 kilometers per hour, 80 miles per hour in freedom units. He was on the outskirts, which meant a long trip back. AI Hoshino's address was unknown. If people found out where she lived, fans and stalkers would hound her, but that also made it harder for him to know where she was. Wheatley, do you think you can detect the dark energy possessing them? If you asked me this before you went on a killing spree, I would have said no. Now? Absolutely. I've acquired enough energy to be able to scan 10 times more distance than before continuously. The density of the energy possessing them will probably help me find them as well. Jason's mind raced with ideas about where an idol like AI might live based on several factors. In less than a second, he had narrowed it down to a few potential areas. Good. I'll run around the city. Tell me when you find their dense energy signatures. Jason hoped he wasn't too late. Chapter 15. Chapter 15, Lies. Jason traversed the rooftops of Tokyo, free-running on rooftops and sometimes using his grappling gun to reach higher places. The cool and crisp morning wind brushed his face, blowing back his hair, but he didn't find it refreshing with how urgent he was feeling. They hadn't found AI Hoshino or the two toddlers in every other area, and this was the last area he guessed a popular idol like AI would live in. There were quite a few high-rise apartments around, usually multiple stories high. If they didn't find AI or the two toddlers here, he didn't know where else to look and will probably just check each and every corner of the city. Wheatley, still no good. Nope. Sorry. I'm surprised that we haven't found it since their dense energy signatures should be like flares for M. Wait a minute. I think I found all of them. Wheatley excitedly shouted. Head directly to your right. Elated by the good news, Jason retracted the grappling gun's hook mid-retraction, horizontally landing on a building wall with a crouch before launching himself to his right with a powerful push. Wait. That's strange, Wheatley mused. What is it? Asked Jason. I'm detecting a fourth dense energy signature getting closer to the three grouped up energy signatures, which should be AI Hoshino and the toddlers. A fourth. Jason furrowed his brows. Who is the fourth energy signature? Third-person POV. In their bedroom, Hoshino smiled excitedly, typing a tweet on her account as she waited for her children to change clothes. Aqua was up and awake, but Ruby still slept like a log, so she had to change her clothes for her. Today was the day of Bikomaki's performance. After all these years of grueling hard work, they had finally reached the point where their group could perform at Tokyo Dome, where only the most popular people and groups in the entertainment industry could dream of performing. As her son pulled down his gray sweater, the doorbell rung. Both mother and son turned towards the door. Could that be the president and the others? As she skipped towards the entrance, the doorbell rung again, covering the padded thumps of her footsteps. Coming. She opened the door expecting to see the president, her wife, and her group. Instead, the one outside was a hooded man holding a bouquet of white roses. Congrats on your Dome concert. How are your twins? He asked. AI's eyes widened in surprise. Only a few people are supposed to know she had twins. Before she could do anything, the man dropped the bouquet, revealing the hidden knife, and stabbed her in the stomach. AI closed her eyes in pain and stumbled backwards in an effort to create distance from the man. She roughly caught herself by placing her hand on the wall and making a loud thud. She held her other hand to her stomach, attempting to ease the pain. Aqua opened the door, curious about the loud sound, and gasped in horror. His mother was bleeding from her stomach while a man stood in the door with a bloody knife in hand. Aquamarine rushed to her side. AI. The man approached closer with crazed eyes and sweat pouring down his face. Does that hurt? I was hurt worse. It was more painful for me? I suffered more? You went and had kids even though you're an idol. AI thought to herself, of course that's how the world sees it. But idols are humans too. Is it bad for me to seek happiness? Worried that he'd attack her son, AI stood between them while her son called out to her. AI, you fan-betraying slut. You treated us fans like we didn't exist. I bet you mocked us behind our backs. I didn't go that far. You damn liar. You lured us in with your constant I love you, crap. It was all lies. I've been irresponsible from the start, AI weakly spoke, breathing heavily while applying pressure to her stomach. I'm not pure, and I'm dishonest and dirty. I don't have a good grasp on what it means to love someone. So, instead, I told pretty lies that would please everyone. The man took a step back with confusion on his face, always hoping that one day, those lies would become truth. I tried my best, worked hard, and lied with everything I had. To me, lies are love. AI raised her eyes to the man. They contained no anger towards him. And in my own way, I thought I was expressing love. I don't know if I was able to love you and the others, but I sang all those songs while thinking that I wanted to. She raised her hand stained with blood towards him with a smile, hoping that someday that would become the truth. Even now, I want to love you. The man lowered his eyes. Liar. You don't even remember who I am. You only just want me to let you go. You're Ryuzuki-kun, aren't you? He looked up in surprise. Huh. You often came to the handshake events. The man said nothing in reply, and she lowered her hand with an embarrassed smile. Oh, am I wrong? Sorry, I was never very good with names. I was happy when I got that star sand from you as a present. I've still got it displayed in my living room. Ryuzuki clutched his head and face. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. What the hell? Tears and snot started leaking as his emotions stirred uncontrollably. That's not what? In the end, Ryuzuki ran away screaming and crying, dropping the knife in the doorway. Just get over here right now. Aquamarine screamed in a panic at the phone in his hand. AI slammed into the door behind her and slid to the ground with closed eyes. She had already lost most of her strength. AI? I've called an ambulance. Well, I let my guard down there. So door chains are for times like this, huh? They never taught us that back at the orphanage. How could she still talk with optimism? Don't try to speak. Aquamarine shouted. The bleeding. It's her abdominal aorta? Shit. Aqua froze. His breathing turned ragged and his heart beat like a drum inside his chest as he tried to think of a way to save his mother. AI saw that her son was distressed, and hugged him to her chest. I'm sorry. This is probably it for me. Aqua shook at her words. No, please. Are you alright? She soothingly pat his head. You're not hurt, are you, Aqua? Tears flowed from his eyes. No, I'm not. I wonder if today's Dome concert will be cancelled. I feel sorry for everyone. The movie schedule had been finalized too. Apologize to the director for me. From inside the room, Ruby approached the door with a worried expression because she could see the blood through the slightly transparent material of the door. She knocked twice, speaking in a weak voice. Hey, what's wrong? What's going on over there? Stay back, Ruby, said Aqua. Ruby grit her teeth and banged the door with her fist. Tell me, Ruby, AI cheerfully called, making Ruby look up because she could hear the weakness in her mother's voice. Your dance at your preschool event was wonderful. You know, I was thinking that maybe you'll become an idol one day, too. Mother and daughter performing together. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Aqua, will you be an actor? AI hugged her son closer and whispered, I wonder, what kind of adults you'll grow up to be. She turned her head towards a photo of them. I'd like to see you with your school backpacks. And on Parents' Day, I want people to say, isn't she a bit young to be Ruby's mother? As the two of you grow up, I want to be there to see it. Not that I was the best mom or anything. She mockingly said to herself, tightening her hold on her son with what little strength she had left, but I'm glad I gave birth to you. Aqua could feel his mother's body losing warmth. And, also, I gotta tell you this. She turned to the door, placing her bloody hand on it. Ruby, Aqua, I love you. Ruby and Aqua's eyes shook. AI cried, smiling with pure joy. I was finally able to say it. I'm sorry, it took me so long. I'm so relieved. Those words definitely weren't a. She stopped her words because she could feel someone's eyes on her. Through sheer force of will, she managed to stay conscious, weakly turning her head towards the open doorway. Another stalker. Jason's POV. Jason had passed by the screaming man with the energy signature and threw a tracking device on him. But he rushed to AI first because Wheatley said her signature was getting weaker. When he saw the bloody knife outside the door, he pieced all the information together and thought he was too late. As he stood in the open doorway, AI laid her back on the door with a bleeding stomach, barely alive and hugging one of the toddler from the videos. They both looked at him with fear in their eyes. AI's eyes widened. Trembling, she tried to stand with clenched teeth. With how much blood there is, her abdominal aorta was probably hit. He took a step forward, and the toddler with aquamarine eyes ran in front of AI, glaring. Get away from AI. AI watched in worry and reached out her hand. Aqua, no. Kid, if you don't let I said get away from her. Damn it, I need to hurry. AI doesn't look like she has that much time left. She's probably staying conscious through sheer determination. Before the kid could react, Jason moved behind him and applied a precise amount of pressure on an area between his shoulder and neck. The boy's eyes closed and Jason caught him before he hit the ground. He let the kid lie on the floor and moved towards AI. Mama? Aqua? What's going on? The little girl behind the door screamed with worry. With shallow breaths, AI stared at him with confusion in her eyes. Stay inside. Ruby, I'm okay. Look, I've only knocked your son out. He's not harmed. And I know you don't trust me, but please, don't move. I'm only here to help. Jason raised his hand, palm facing up. Wheatley, hurry. If he didn't have Bruce's knowledge about the Lazarus Pit, knowledge in medicine and chemistry, and his experience in his soul, he would have already lost hope. A glowing green medical capsule that was slightly larger than normal appeared in the air and fell on his palm. In his other hand, he summoned a water bottle from his ring. Jason gently laid her down. Hurry, drink this. You'll have a couple more minutes to survive if you do. By then, I'll be able to treat your wound and stop the bleeding. She hesitated for just a moment before slightly opening her mouth, letting him place the capsule inside. AI sipped from the water bottle, and the effects were immediate. As her body temperature increased to normal levels, her skin gradually regained its rosy hue. Next, he had Wheatley create a breathing mask connected to a metal cylinder filled with anesthesia. He covered her breathing airways with the mask, and let the anesthesia flow at a controlled rate. This anesthesia will put you to sleep and numb your body. You'll need it because the surgery will be too painful without it. Jason made eye contact with her, giving her the most reassuring smile he could and spoke slowly. Don't worry. I'll take care of you, and by the time you wake up, you'll be healed. You have my word. AI slowly blinked and spoke through the mask. You seem like a good guy. What's your name? You can call me Jason. Jason-san. If it's not too much, please protect Ruby and Aqua in my place. AI pleaded. Jason's eyes widened at her request. He paused for a moment before giving her a determined nod. I will. You have my word. Thank you. AI fell unconscious seconds later. With the right conditions set, Jason began the operation. He made sure his hands were clean before wearing a pair of surgical gloves. Next, he cut the cloth where the stab wound was and sterilized it with alcohol, inspecting the wound in the process. It was a deep cut, but the Lazarus-based pill healed most of it without leaving a scar, and clots have already formed. Good. Seems like my theory worked. The medicines probably healed most of the internal damage as well, which only means I just need to do a few more things to finish the treatment. He brought out his set of tools, including a surgical thread that would dissolve over time. Jason gave his word that he wouldn't let AI Hoshino die and he will keep it no matter what. Chapter 16, You're our hero? With complete calm, Jason's hands moved dexterously and carefully, making sure that each movement was precise, controlled, and efficient. It was as if he had done surgeries for years. Looks like Joe was right about me needing the power up, but for a different reason. I have little to no experience in performing surgeries, but thankfully, Bruce followed in his father's footsteps. Jason went through the procedure swiftly with no errors made, and when he finished, breathed a deep sigh of relief, leaning on the wall behind him. His gloved hands were dyed red in AI's blood. I did it. She'll live? Spectacular job? Do you think I should extract the energy possessing her, now that she's alright? It's quite thick and slimy in person. Jason nodded. Go ahead. Just don't harm her. Fantastic. Wheatley began the process. The dark, cloak-like energy around AI and the thick tendrils of pitch-black energy connecting her and Wheatley's body became visible. What Wheatley said about her being possessed by an extraordinary amount of dark energy was true. A frown formed on Jason's face because he could feel the ominous and unnerving aura of the energy. It felt like his anger and grief were about to erupt, and it was only his will and control over his emotions that allowed him to stay calm. So this is what a malevolent, godlike being's energy feels like. Ruby, who he had figured out to be AI's daughter, knocked on the door and spoke with a trembling voice. Mr. W. What is that? I am scared. Aqua, her son lying on the floor, began tossing and turning while making grunting sounds. Wheatley, the kids are being affected. Shut it off. I am trying. It's as if the energy has a mind of its own and won't let go. Wheatley struggled to pull himself away, and Jason felt his distress through their connection. Jason, help. Stay still. Jason stood to his full height, summoning the all blades into his hands and cutting the tendrils between AI and Wheatley in one stroke. The energy vanished from his naked eyes, but when the tendrils retracted to surround AI again, it felt like it was watching him. Well, that's a bad sign if I've ever seen one. He unsummoned the blades. Wheatley, you all right there? Wheatley slowly backed away while looking at AI in fear, shifting up and down. I am absolutely fine now, thanks to you. Anyway, I'm just going to stay as far away as I can for now. Jason sighed at his antics, but that really was a close call. We'll postpone the extraction until we figure out a way to do it without the kids around or if we figure out a better method of extracting the energy. Jason quickly began storing his tools and the breathing mask inside the ring, leaving his bloody gloves for last. Why don't you go ahead and go outside? Watch out for any police, ambulance, or anyone approaching the condo. Notify me if you spot any of them. I'll do just that. Wheatley rapidly nodded his body and rushed outside like his life depended on it. It seems like he was slightly traumatized by the experience with the tendrils. Now what do I do with you two? Jason muttered as he looked between Ruby, who was still behind the door, and Aqua, who had calmed down. Having made his decision, Jason approached the door and opened it. The little girl with blonde hair and ruby eyes from the video was slightly away from the door, sitting on the floor and holding her knees. She heard the door open and looked up, flinching when she saw him. I guess I do cut an intimidating figure, and I probably look like I just came out of a horror movie. His days-old clothes had bloodstains all over, from his black hoodie down to his shoes. I really need to take a shower and wear some clean clothes. Hey mister? Is mama okay? Ruby sniffled with teary eyes. I heard your conversation. You said you'd treat her. Is she fine now? Jason looked at her with sympathy in his eyes and nodded. He stepped aside, letting Ruby see her mother, who was lying on the floor unconscious. Ai's chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm, the paleness of her skin almost completely gone. Don't move her too much, he whispered to her. I've done all I can, but your mother is still recovering from all the blood she's lost. Ruby absent-mindedly nodded at his words, walking closer to her mother with unsteady steps. Jason thought she was going to trip, but she eventually reached her mother, kneeling down and holding her hand. Mama, I can't believe it. You're okay. Ruby's body trembled as she hugged her mother's hand tightly to her chest. Relief filled her voice as she cried tears of joy and whispered, "Thank goodness you're alive." Jason watched and let Ai's daughter have her moment with her mother. She deserved it. I'm glad I made it in time. If I was late for even a few seconds, these kids would have ended up without their mother. Jason then frowned as he tried connecting the dots. The kids in the video turned out to be Ai's kids, but they looked to be around 3 to 4 years old. That meant Ai got pregnant when she was 16, but who and where is their father? Furthermore, how did a murderous stalker find out where Ai lived? They'd surely have taken care and made sure only people they trusted knew her address. Jason scanned the condo around him, his eyes peeking out every visible detail. Everything was still clean and polished. Even some of the furniture looked newly bought. They've probably just moved, then. So how the hell did a stalker find out where Ai moved when they've only lived here for a few weeks at most? Was it her manager? The other members of her idol group? Her relatives? Or was it the unknown father who didn't seem to live with Ai? After analyzing the condo, he found no signs of a man living with Ai, which meant he was either dead or uninvolved with Ai and her children. I'm lacking in information. I'll need to investigate, starting with the stalker I passed by while I rushed towards Ai. Jason brought out his phone, displaying the location of the tracking device he stuck to the stalker's back. Looks like he's still moving farther away. I'll deal with him after I make sure the kids are safe. As Jason searched for more information on Ai and her agency, he felt a tug on his pants. Stopping what he was doing, he looked down and found Ruby staring at him with bright eyes. Her dried-up tears created 2 lines going down her face. Ruby's lips curled up into a smile of gratitude. Thank you so much for helping our mother, Jason-san. Jason blinked in surprise before he slightly chuckled and shook his head with a smile. He kneeled down, gently patting her head and ruffling her hair. No need to thank me, kid. I'm just a stranger who wanted to help. Ruby firmly shook her head. Nah, you're our hero. A hero? Huh. A wry smile appeared on his face. Not really. I only did the right thing. That's it. Ruby once again shook her head. You're really gonna keep calling me a hero? Ruby nodded with determination in her eyes. Jason sighed, but a smile remained on his face. Sounds like I'm not winning this argument. Alright. I'll be your hero. Alright. Ruby jumped in place. Are you going to stay with us? It depends. That seemed to be the wrong answer. Ruby pouted, narrowing his eyes at him. No. Ruby hugged his arm. You promised Mama you'd protect us. You have to stay. She's trying to hang on to the single current source of safety and security nearby. That's not good. Can't get them too attached to me. Jason gently removed her arms with no issue, making her glare and pout more intense. How about this? You go wake your brother up while I move your mother to a more comfortable spot. The floor's not a good place to lie down on, you know. Unexpectedly, Ruby seemed to figure out that he was attempting to distract her, based on how her expression barely twitched. She seemed to be more intelligent than she lets on. Fine, I'll go wake up my brother. But be gentle with Mama. She's an idol and her body must be taken care of with utmost sincerity. Yes. I'll follow your orders to the letter, young miss. Jason gestured his head towards her brother. Now go. Ruby humphed, turning her head away at his remark, but there was a clear skip in her step as she went to wake up her brother. Jason gently lifted Ai into a princess carry and walked towards the closest bed, which was in the kids' room, and slowly set her down. Ai, brother, calm down. The children's panicked shouts echoed from behind him, and Jason sighed. Time to be a hero. Chapter 17, Leak. Third-person POV. Time to be a hero. Jason walked back towards the kids, and as he expected, Aqua would have an extreme reaction after waking up. Aqua shook Ruby back and forth with a panicked expression. The only thing he remembered before suddenly falling unconscious was another, far more intimidating man standing in the doorway, wanting to get to AI. But when he woke up, AI had disappeared, leaving only her blood on the floor. Where is AI? Where is she? Is she okay? Aqua could feel his heart bursting at the thought of AI dying. He could still vividly remember the scent of AI's blood and how it covered her from head to toe. Ruby answered, her voice trembling slightly from her brother's shaking. Mama's okay? Jason-san saved her. She lifted her left arm, pointing in Jason's direction. Look. Aqua's eyes widened in disbelief, shocked by Ruby's words. He couldn't believe it. Following where she pointed at, his eyes widened at the bloody figure of Jason, and it was as if he had returned to that moment of seeing the stalker holding a bloody knife. Aqua stood protectively in front of his sister. Ruby, stay back. Unexpectedly, his sister pushed past him. What are you doing? Ruby narrowed her eyes at her brother and crossed her arms defiantly. You need to calm down. Jason-san is the one who saved Mama. He isn't here to harm her or us, and if he was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Hey, Jason interjected, catching their attention. Your mother is inside your bedroom, all safe and sound. If you don't believe me. He stepped aside, gesturing for him to step inside. You can go and check yourself. Without replying, Aqua rushed past them and went inside, with Jason and Ruby following him. You know, I've never seen my brother like this before, Ruby quietly commented. He was almost always calm and rational, and even annoying sometimes, so it's strange seeing him being so emotional, but I can understand why. If Mama had really died. She grew teary-eyed just trying to imagine such a scenario, but a comforting hand fell on top of her head, shaking her out of her imagination. Don't worry, Ruby. Your mother's fine now, Jason soothingly said. But what if another stalker comes again? I'll make sure that won't happen, Jason resolutely said. He was going to start monitoring them after this, but to really make sure they'll be safe, he was going to find out how their new address got leaked. You have my word that no harm will come to your mother. Really? You promise? Jason nodded. You have my promise. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hero. Ruby gave a thankful smile. Jason's mouth twitched at the title. When they entered the room, Aqua was holding his mother's hand, with tears flowing from his eyes. Aqua couldn't hold his tears back anymore when he saw his mother breathing and alive. In his past life, he was a doctor. He thought that with all the blood that she had lost, as well as because of how deep the wound was and where it was located, she wouldn't have survived. Yet here she was, alive and not bleeding anymore. If it wasn't because of the blood staining her clothes and the noticeable paleness of her skin, he would have thought she was perfectly fine. Aqua wiped his tears and snot away with his sweater's sleeve. How did you save her? He turned his eyes towards the stitched stab wound, which looked a lot less severe than what he remembered. She was bleeding excessively from the abdominal aorta. There's no possible way you could have saved her in the state she was in. I also say that you've stitched the wound, but you don't seem to have any of the proper tools on you. Ruby looked at Jason with curiosity. Jason blinked in surprise at his words. Huh, you're one smart kid. Where'd you learn all that? Actually, never mind. Jason then shrugged. Well, to answer your question. It's a secret. Jason flashed a smile. Aqua was still curious, but dropped his curiosity in favor of focusing on the warmth of AI's hand. She was alive. That was all that mattered to him. Aqua still remembered the feeling of her body growing cold, the sound of her beating heart slow down, and the weakness in her voice as she spoke what were almost her last words. It was all because of that stalker. Aqua grit his teeth. He was overcome with a freezing rage that seeped into every corner of his being. More rage and desire to kill than he's ever had in both his lives. He thought back to the stalker that killed him in his last life and how they were the same person, and he began to connect the dots. That stalker and the man who killed me are one and the same. How did he pin down the hospital AI had been admitted to? Why'd he come to her new residence she'd only just moved to? He didn't look like the type of person with special skills of any kind. I simply can't believe he'd be capable of such detective work. Someone was feeding him information. And it must have been someone quite close to AI. As far as I know, it was only the president who knew about her hospital. But why would he do such a thing to the public face of his agency, who he cherished so greatly? One of her co-workers? No, the Bikomake girls weren't even that close, and I never saw anyone who seemed like a good friend of AI. It's evident that AI didn't have any relatives who were around, and it appeared she didn't know their contact details either. So that only leaves our father. She stubbornly kept him a secret from the president, but considering how narrow AI's social circle was, there's a high probability the guy is in the same industry. Seeing that he and I are related by blood, I can infer his identity by DNA testing his hair. The guy who put AI through all of this is someone in the entertainment industry. A plan began forming in his mind, and a malicious smile grew on his face. I won't rest. Not until I find him and make him pay with my own hand. Outside, Wheatley, who was acting as a sentry, could sense the growth in dark energy and worriedly contacted Jason. Jason. Is everything alright in there? I can detect a sudden spike in dark energy. It's quite concerning. I think I know what you're talking about. Jason looked at Aqua with concern. From having Cassandra's experience and skills being integrated into his soul, he could now read body language as if it was his primary form of communication. I can see the kid's anger and maliciousness. The kid knows something, and it looks like he's made a plan inside that head of his. Hey, brother. Ruby called out, shaking Aqua out of his thoughts. Why are you smiling so creepily like that? Aqua wiped the smile off his face, blinking and remembering where he was and who he was with. He cleared his throat and looked away. It's nothing. Ruby looked at him doubtfully. I don't think it's nothing. Come on, spill it. Aqua looked at her before his eyes shifted over to Jason and shook his head. I told you, it's nothing. Even though the man saved AI's life, which he was very thankful for, he was practically a stranger and he didn't want to involve Ruby in his plan. Jason crouched to their level, and even then, he was still taller than them by a few inches. You two, mind if I ask you a question? Ruby and Aqua exchanged a look before they turned back to Jason. What is your question? Aqua calmly asked, tightening his hold on AI's hand. Do either of you know how a stalker could have found out where AI lived? I know it's rude of me to ask, but if I'm going to get to the bottom of this and catch the perpetrators, I'll need information. Ruby silently shook her head. She had no clue how a stalker could have found their new address. Before I answer, do you mind answering some questions of mine? The look Aqua sent Jason as he asked was strange. It wasn't something you would expect from a kid of around 3 years old. If he was to be honest, it slightly unnerved him. The contrast of his childlike face and the dissecting look in his eyes was too much. Jason calmly nodded. I'll answer as best as I can. I'm grateful that you were able to save my mother, but I'm curious, who are you? Are you a neighbor of ours? And if so, what urged you to help? Aqua asked. He truly was grateful, but only an idiot would answer a personal question asked by a stranger without knowing if said stranger was trustworthy and wouldn't use it for malicious purposes. Jason quickly came up with foolproof answers and lied as naturally as he breathed. To answer your questions in order, my name's Jason Todd and I used to be a doctor before becoming a private investigator in America. I don't live nearby, but I'm looking for a place to move into, and was inspecting another condo on this floor. That's how I was able to hear the screams of that stalker. And I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I saw that your mother was in danger of dying and I had the ability to help, so I did. While most of Jason's answers to Aqua's questions were lies or half-truths, he was completely honest in his last answer. Aqua didn't respond immediately and merely stared at Jason in silence with unblinking eyes. Jason could tell that Aqua was debating on whether he was trustworthy. Even though he was extremely confident in his ability to lie, Aqua could still refrain from answering his question. While that would be disappointing, he'd understand, and he wasn't going to force a toddler to answer his questions. The only reason he asked in the first place is because they're a likely source of reliable information. After a moment of silent contemplation, Aqua finally gave a hesitant nod. He was confident in his ability to judge and read a person's character, and even though he had only known Jason-san for a short amount of time, he had saved AI from death, had been kind to Ruby and him, and didn't seem to be a hardcore fan or stalker of AI. He didn't even look shocked about the fact that AI secretly has 2 kids and hasn't even mentioned it at all, which meant he either doesn't care or he doesn't know AI's an idol. Aqua was betting on the latter being the case. Plus, when he answered his last question, the look in his eyes changed and Aqua thought that Jason-san was someone he could trust, even if just a little. Even though the part about being a doctor and a private detective was slightly unbelievable because they're 2 completely different professions, he was willing to give Jason-san the benefit of the doubt. It wasn't impossible for someone who looked to be in their 20s to accomplish such things, and he even knew of some child prodigies who have done far more impressive stuff. Aqua looked at AI and Ruby before turning to Jason and looking him in the eye, whispering, I don't think AI's agency director or her group mates would leak our address to a fan, and she doesn't seem to have any relatives or close friends. That only leaves our father. Jason-san, since you were a private investigator in America, would it be possible for you to investigate this matter for us? I can convince AI's agency director to pay you for the job. Ruby pouted. Hey, why are you leaving me out of the conversation? Just as she was about to shout, Jason pat her head. Ruby blissfully smiled and completely forgave them. From his body language, Jason could tell Aqua was still leaving some details out, but this amount of information was enough for him. Jason shook his head. I was going to do it anyway, and you don't have to pay me. I'll do it for free. Do you have a piece of paper? I'll give you my phone number. Ah, here. Ruby opened a nearby drawer, grabbing a piece of paper and a pen before handing it to Jason. Jason quickly wrote down his phone number before handing it back. If you need to contact me, just send a message or call. Jason then turned his head towards the door. He could hear the distant sound of a siren getting close. Jason, an ambu. I can hear it, but thanks for watching for me, Wheatley. Oh, you can hear it? That's amazing cause from where I'm at, I can barely tell. You're welcome, by the way. Jason called the kids' attention. Hey, it sounds like an ambulance is close. They blinked in confusion before going silent and trying to listen. The room was only filled with the sound of breathing, and after seconds of trying, they gave up. Ruby tilted her head. I can't hear anything. Are you lying? Why would I lie about that? I just have great hearing. Jason shrugged. But it seems like I have to go now. Unexpectedly, Ruby sprints and hugs Jason's leg. Please don't go. You promised to protect Mama and us. Jason smiled apologetically, leaning down and patting her head. Sorry, but I have to. Remember that stalker guy? I heard him screaming and I know his type. He doesn't seem to be right in the head, so there's a chance he'll do something drastic. I have to stop him from doing anything like that and find out how he knew where you lived. Ruby sniffled. But you'll come and visit us at the hospital, right? I will. Just message me the hospital's address, and I'll be there. He turned towards Aqua. You two should prioritize taking care of your mother. I'll deal with her stalker. Aqua quietly nodded with a stern frown on his face while Ruby reluctantly let go of his leg. I'll see you two again later, and next time, we can properly introduce ourselves. You okay with that? Jason received a nod from each. Seconds later, Jason exited the condo, looking at his phone. He was specifically looking at the stationary blip on his map. Wheatley, let's go. I'm going to get to the bottom of this mess. Without hesitation, Jason leapt off the railing and into the city below. Chapter 18, Truths. Jason silently landed in front of the door of the stalker's apartment with his black face mask on, and he had exchanged his dirty clothes for a clean set of clothes. He wore a black denim jacket, worn over a white t-shirt, and paired with black jeans and black boots. The stalker lived in one of the cheaper areas of the city, as shown by the not-so-well-maintained doors. From outside, he could hear what seemed to be a music video. He could easily distinguish AI Hoshino's voice from the others. Watching her videos even after mercilessly stabbing her. Huh? This guy's an extreme stalker, alright. Well, this is it. Wheatley hid behind Jason. The door is positively oozing with dark energy. Not as much as AI Hoshino's, but it's close. As a precaution, I'll stay behind you. Jason tried opening the door, but it was locked. He clicked his tongue, getting a pair of bobby pins from the ring and inserting them into the lock. It's been a while since I last had to pick a lock. But this one's a cinch. Half a second later, the lock clicked. Jason returned the pins into the ring and opened the door. When the door opened, a long, drawn-out creak echoed through the darkness of the apartment. Jason closed the door behind him, drowning the apartment in darkness, but he could still see just as well in the dark. The darkness even felt welcoming. Lights are off, but I hear some shuffling inside. He walked further inside, silently stepping over pieces of trash and litter. The apartment was a complete mess inside, just like the apartment of that old man who managed a convenience store. At least it didn't smell as bad as he thought it would. As Jason came closer to the room where the sound of the music video came from, he could hear some quiet and deranged muttering as well. What am I gonna do? I killed AI, I killed AI, I killed AI, I killed AI. Jason frowned. He's definitely not right in the head. Opening the door to the room, which was slightly open, he peeked inside. The stalker was rocking back and forth in his chair with his hood on while muttering and watching a music video of AI Hoshino's on a computer. The bright screen was the only source of light, but it also revealed the walls which were completely covered in AI Hoshino and Bikomake merchandise. Pictures, wallpapers, CDs, DVDs, photobooks, the stalker had it all. This was Jason's first time dealing with an idol stalker, but he wasn't surprised. Without any more delays, Jason entered the room and with one arm, grabbed and lifted the man by his hoodie. AHH, the man shrieked, covering his face with his hand as if it was a barrier that protected him from Jason. You. Jason growled, his voice far deeper than normal. Who gave you AI Hoshino's address? Tell me. He violently shook him. WAWHH, how do you know about that? How? You don't need to know. His eyes narrowed into a fierce glare. The stalker could see his eyes somehow glow an icy blue and almost pissed his pants in fear. Here's what's going to happen. If you don't tell me how you got her address right this second, I'll break your arm. If you don't tell me even after that, I'll break your other arm and your left leg. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5. I don't. 4. Please just let me go. Running out of time. 3. IILL call the police. 2. I am sorry for killing AI. I'm really sorry. 1. The stalker finally relented and shouted with a trembling voice, it was given to me through a letter. He continued after seeing that the stranger who broke into his house hadn't hurt him. After one of AI's handshake events, this creepy guy handed me a letter. He was wearing a mask, a pair of sunglasses, and a cap, so I couldn't see his face, but I remember seeing his blonde hair. Has he contacted you before? And no, the stalker hesitantly answered. This bastard's lying. Don't you dare lie to me. Jason roared, slamming him into the wall covered with AI's pictures. Tell me the damn truth or so help me, I will break every fucking bone in your body. The man shrieked and started crying while involuntarily peeing himself. No, not that, please, I'll tell you everything, I'll tell you everything. He paused, sniffling. 3 years ago, he told me about AI's pregnancy and gave me the name of the hospital she went to through a letter. It's in this rural area in Miyazaki. I went there to check if it was true, and it was. While I was there, I pushed the doctor that handled her pregnancy off of a cliff in the mountains. His body is probably still there somewhere. After that, I came back. That's all I know, that's all I know. The kids probably don't know about this. It's really starting to look like the kid's father is the one who leaked her address. Where are the letters? I threw them away because I was afraid of someone finding them. Jason let him stew in fear. He seemed to be truthful, and he didn't look like the type of person who could lie through their teeth in a situation like this. But was that all the information he had? Jason began asking more questions, and the stalker answered them all truthfully, not putting up any further resistance. He then apologized for killing AI over and over, talking about how he was going to pay the price by killing himself. Jason shut him off with a nerve pinch at the base of his neck, knocking him out with the side effect of erasing his short-term memory. This way, he won't remember everything that had just happened in the past few minutes. Jason dropped him to the ground and wiped his gloved hands. That takes care of him. Wheatley, start extracting his energy. Wheatley materialized and hesitantly began to extract tendrils of pitch-black energy connecting him to the stalker. Time to see if there's anything left in this cluttered room. Jason searched high and low for the letters and any other form of evidence he could find, but ended up with nothing. Just merchandise upon merchandise of AI Hoshino or Bikomaki. How much of his money did he spend on merchandise? Jason frustratedly finished his search of the room and started investigating the computer. The search on the computer turned out to be useless as well because all it had were downloaded videos, pictures, and music, all featuring AI Hoshino in some form. Doesn't look like he has anything else I could use. Nothing at all, Jason muttered to himself. He turned towards Wheatley. How long is the extraction going to take? Don't tell me it's going to be as long as Saki's. What? No. I've gotten a hang of extracting energy now, thanks to that day and a half long killing spree you went on. It will still take a couple of minutes, though. I see. I'll wait, then. Jason began searching on his phone for the hospital where AI conceived her children, as well as the doctor the stalker killed. The information he gave about the hospital was true, but there was no information on the doctor named Goro Amimiya except for the fact that he went missing 3 years ago, which also validates what the stalker said about killing the doctor that took care of AI. Since the doctor's body is in the mountains, there was a high likelihood that the wildlife would have already taken care of it, leaving little chance for someone to find the complete carcass. The extraction is complete. Can we leave now? This room is so strange. Are there a lot of obsessed humans like him? Good job on the extraction. And yes, there are a lot more humans out there that are just like him. Some are even worse. That's depressing. I agree. But you recorded our conversation, right? Wheatley's body nodded in confirmation. Transfer his murder confession onto a USB and place it on his back. Label it as murder evidence. Jason had mentally ordered Wheatley to use his recording function to record their full conversation. He had done it with almost every criminal he caught or killed. Wheatley followed and created a black USB with the label of murder evidence on both sides. With a mechanical arm made out of solid light, he stuck it on the stalker's upper back with tape while also placing a piece of paper below it. On the paper was a large, visible arrow pointing up. Jason nodded. Good job. I've called the police and they'll be here in a few minutes. Let's go. AI Hoshino third-person POV. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled her nostrils as she slowly regained consciousness. The sound of machines beeped steadily in the background, and the gentle hum of voices could be heard from beyond the thin, pale green curtains surrounding her bed. Her eyelids fluttered, and she tried to speak, but her throat was dry, and her words came out as a hoarse whisper. A nurse appeared at her bedside, smiling kindly as she offered her a glass of water. AI Hoshino's memory slowly returned as she sipped the cool liquid, and she realized with a jolt that she was in a hospital. Panic rose within her, and she grabbed the nurse's hand. Where is my family? The nurse patted her hand comfortingly. Please calm down. Your family is just outside the door. I'll call them inside, now that you're awake. The nurse left, and she waited on her bed. Her hand rose to her slightly aching stomach, covered by the pink patient gown they had switched her dress with. It doesn't hurt that much anymore. The last thing she remembered was asking Jason-san to take care of her children. She could still imagine his gentle blue eyes and how his soothing words slowly lulled her to sleep. Or was it the anesthesia? She couldn't tell. But most important of all, were Ruby and Aqua okay? As she waited for the nurse, the worry inside her grew. A series of shouts then interrupted her train of thought, and she turned her head, only to see 2 heads of blonde hair rushing in her direction and jumping onto the bed like excited rabbits. Behind them, the president and his wife, Miyako, followed. AI caught them in her embrace. Mama. AI lovingly held her 2 children, who hugged her back with just as much love, but with tears and snot mixed in. I love them with all my heart, and it's not a lie. You really made us worry, AI, the president said with a furrowed brow. If that Jason guy wasn't there, ow, what did you do that for? Miyako had slapped the back of her husband's head before crossing her arms. Can't you see they're having a moment? The president then blinked owlishly behind his sunglasses and chuckled with a wry smile. Sorry about that. We'll talk about it later, then. Ruby, Aqua. AI nuzzled their cheeks, whispering, Mama's okay now. There's no need for you to worry, but are you two okay? They both hurriedly wiped their tears away. Ruby enthusiastically nodded her head. We're super okay? It was you who we worried about most. Aqua merely nodded his head in agreement while holding her hand. Thank goodness. AI smiled, tilting her head. But where is Jason-san? Isn't he with you? Nope. Ruby shook her head and pouted. He's cool, but he's a meanie. He immediately left us to find that stalker when the ambulance came. Jason-san left because he wanted to find the stalker and gather evidence. Also told us he used to be a private investigator in America, Aqua interjected. He gave us his phone number and I still have it. He said that we could text him the hospital's address and he'll visit. Ruby crossed her arms. He promised. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. The president joined in. This guy's practically a stranger. I mean, he saved you, but he already knows about the twins and might also live right next to you, which makes him dangerous for you and your career. AI blinked in surprise at that and covered her mouth excitedly. He's our neighbor. He might be your neighbor. Keyword, might, Satu corrected. Aqua said that the guy was looking for a place to move into and was inspecting the condo next to yours, which is why he happened to be close by and heard the stalker screaming. That still means he'll be our neighbor, right? I don't know. Maybe? Aqua didn't really say anything about him confirming it. Oh, she still smiled, but she was slightly disappointed inside. How was he? Ruby. Aqua. He's really tall, really handsome, too. Ruby exaggeratingly waved her hands with a smile on her face. Even when he crouched, he was still taller than us by a lot. I thought Jason-san was a supermodel at first because of how tall and good-looking he is, but he was actually a doctor before and, like brother said, he used to work as a private investigator. AI Hoshino wowed in amazement and smiled as Ruby began describing what happened when she was unconscious, including how Aqua overreacted and attempted to protect her from Jason. AI giggled when Aqua turned away in embarrassment with a red hue in his cheeks. And. Ruby tilted her head. He's really kind too. He gave me lots of head pats. Oh, really? AI was becoming more sure that her judgment about him was right. Did Jason-san ask or say anything about me? Ruby put a finger to her cheek and narrowed her eyes in thought. He doesn't seem to know about you, Aqua calmly answered. Jason-san is a foreigner, so he probably isn't that invested in Japanese idols. If he was, he'd react or say something about us, but none of those happened. Maybe he doesn't even know about Japanese idols. Ruby nodded her head proudly, as if she was the one who answered. Really? The more I hear about him, the more I want to meet him in person properly. AI smiled and turned towards the president and his wife. Could you send him the hospital's address? I'd like to thank him in person. The president and his wife shared a look before they both reluctantly nodded. Fine. He did save your life, and he knows about Aqua and Ruby, so I guess it's better if we talk to him in person. Aqua handed the piece of paper with Jason-san's number to the president, who brought out his phone and entered the number. Miyako-san, AI called, and Miyako turned to her. What happened to the Dome concert? Miyako sighed. As you would expect, it's cancelled. After we received the call from Aqua, we immediately notified the police and the organizers of the situation. But don't worry about that for now and focus on your recovery. It's really a miracle that you're alive, you know? You know what the emergency responders said? They said you lost liters of blood and should have died from the blood loss alone. Your cut abdominal aorta could have also killed you. The doctor said that less than half of the people with a ruptured aorta survive, and whatever Jason-san did to treat you is something he'd never seen before. He said that for some reason, your abdominal aorta is almost fully healed, which is impossible, according to him. See, Jason-san is amazing. Ruby jumped on the bed in excitement. Honestly, I think the doctor had wanted to meet Jason-san in person more than us with how amazed he was. Miyako chuckled while shaking her head. They wouldn't believe her even if she told them the truth that Jason-san might have superpowers. AI could still remember how the strangely glowing green pill suddenly appeared in the air and fell on his hand. When she consumed it, she had immediately felt rejuvenated and could feel her condition getting better in real time. Even after that, he had made a breathing mask appear out of thin air in the same way. AI held her hands to her chest. Jason-san saved my life. So it's only appropriate that I keep his secret in return. The president turned back around and pocketed his phone. I got a reply from Jason-san. He said he's on his way. Chapter 19, Interlude 1. Location unknown. Date, April 12, 20XX. Time, 3:38 p.m. A handsome young man with spiky black hair and eyebrows and piercing dark eyes drove inside his gray Nissan. A business suit worn over a white shirt and black tie adorned his figure. As he drove on a road overlooking the ocean, a call popped up on his car screen. He glanced down at the screen and saw the name of his chief of staff flashing on the display, and was filled with surprise. Karasuma tapped the screen, accepting the call. Hello, he said, concentrated on driving the car. Agent Karasuma, the chief of staff's voice echoed through the speaker. We have a situation that requires your attention. What is it? Karasuma asked. He had a bad feeling about this. A series of murders has occurred in Tokyo recently, the chief of staff said. We need you to take charge of the investigation. Karasuma's grip on the steering wheel tightened. They wouldn't call him if the number was low or if the people killed were of low status. How many victims? Have you released this to the public? We've counted 53 in the last 48 hours, the chief of staff replied. All of them were members of a drug ring involved in dealing with cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and that new aphrodisiac drug that's been circulating in Japan. A common link among all of them is that they've either dealt to kids, raped, or murdered. All dead with one bullet shot to the head. And no, the public has no clue yet. Mass panic will ensue if news got out. Karasuma felt a cold shiver down his spine. What's the status of the investigation? Local law enforcement is working on it, the chief of staff said. But we need your expertise on this matter. This one is extremely dangerous, Karasuma. We suspect the murderer is a professional assassin. A highly skilled and lethal one. Someone who may be in the same league as the Reaper. We have a list of probable suspects, but none of them have taken responsibility for any of the murders, and few have the right motivation. I understand, Karasuma said, his mind already racing with the possibilities. What's my first move? Get to Tokyo as soon as possible, the chief of staff said. I'll send you the details of the case on your way. Understood, Karasuma said, ending the call. He took a deep breath and focused his attention on the road ahead, his mind already formulating a plan of action. As a military agent, he had seen his fair share of violent crimes, but that many kills in 2 days was mind-boggling, even if it was the Reaper. Who was behind the murders? Yamamoto stepped on the gas and sped towards Tokyo, his mind sharp and his senses on high alert. He had a job to do, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. Just a little segue for my next planned arc. Also, I've read the recent comments about the pacing and am just going to stick with a slow-medium pace. It won't be that big of a change. Sauce, Assassination Classroom. Comment. 24 Comment. Vote. Chapter 20, Chapter 19, Hospital Visit. Third-person POV. As they waited for Jason to arrive, AI conversed with the president and Miyako while hugging her children. AI bowed her head towards the president, who stared in confusion at her action. I'm sorry for making you cancel the Dome concert, President. I know it's been your dream ever since you started this agency too. Wait. He raised his hand, signaling her to stop. Why are you apologizing for that? You were the one who almost died? Besides, it's not that big of an issue. We could just schedule another one in the future when you've recovered and returned to good physical health. It won't be long since the doctor said you'd recover within a week or two. But, AI frowned worriedly. What about the movie? The schedule was just finalized. Look, just take care of yourself for now. We'll handle everything, Miyako interjected, crossing her arms. She continued in a gentler tone, and next time, don't just open the door if you're not sure who's there. Even if you decide to open it, at least use the door chain so they can't just barge inside. I hate to say this, but your kids would have been devastated if they lost you. Hearing this, both Ruby and Aqua tightened their hold on AI. AI looked down at her children, calling out to them, Ruby, Aqua, Mama promises to never leave you, okay? They nodded, though their faces were stuck to her sides. AI giggled at how cute they were being. Now, Mama can be with you too as you grow up. Ruby tilted her head up from her side, blinking her teary eyes. Mama, if you become an idol, you and Mama can dance together. Ruby's eyes lit up, and she hugged her mama's neck, being careful not to be too aggressive with her actions. Yay. AI turned to her son, Aqua. Hearing his name, Aqua let go and stared at AI questioningly. AI, if you become an actor, Mama is sure you'll be one of the best actors ever because you have Mama's genes. Aqua closed his eyes and thought to himself before looking back at AI. I'll try. For Aqua, his decision rested on whether Jason-san could find out who their father was. But being an actor could also give him the opportunity to find out who their father was if he could get a strand of their hair. AI smiled reassuringly. Well, I'm sure that whatever Aqua plans on doing, he'll be very good at it. After all, you're super smart. As AI talked with her children, someone knocked on the door. Ah, that must be Jason-san. I'll get it, Seta said, approaching the door. Opening the door, he was greeted by the nurse. Jason-san is here. I'll take my leave now. Please inform the receptionist if you need anything else, she said before bowing and leaving. Seta looked left and right before tilting his head. Where is he? Hello, Seta-san. Seta jumped and almost screamed, but he held it in. He turned to the right, where Jason's voice came from. So sorry didn't see you there. He trailed off because what was in front of him was no ordinarily tall man dressed in a black denim jacket, worn over a white t-shirt, and paired with black jeans and black boots. Seta slowly looked up, his eyes bulging when he noticed the outline of Jason's chest straining his shirt, and he thought in amazement, this guy is jacked. And those kids weren't kidding. He's taller than everyone I know. Jason offered his hand that wasn't carrying a bulging plastic bag. It's nice to meet you, Seta-san. Seta nervously shook Jason's hand and returned the greeting. And nice to meet you as well, Jason-san. Please, come inside. They've been waiting for you? As he walked back, he brought out his handkerchief and wiped some sweat off his face. His hands are huge, and his voice sounds so deep and calm. I wouldn't be surprised if he could sing. Jason nodded and followed him, ducking under the doorway. After getting their text message, he bought some food and drinks for everyone, but not before asking Setu if it was okay to do so. And before he entered the hospital, he checked the perimeter and made sure there weren't any more stalkers around. Jason-san is here, Setu announced, making everyone turn to them. When they finally saw Jason, everyone but Ruby and Aqua's eyes widened when they saw his enormous frame. Jason-san, you're here. Ruby shouted, her eyes gleaming with excitement. She hurriedly got off the bed and hugged his leg. Whoa. Slow down. Jason reached down and pat her head. You're gonna hurt yourself if you aren't careful. What are you gonna do if you fall? I'll be fine because you'll catch me, won't you? Well, you aren't wrong there. He chuckled and took off his face mask, greeting AI and the woman he deduced to be Seta's wife based on the ring on her left hand's ring finger that was identical to Seta's. Jason was also glad that AI had begun to look far better than she did in the morning. Light had returned to her eyes, which he had just noticed to be gradient colored from purple to pink. I've seen all kinds of eyes, but this is a first. I apologize for not introducing myself first. My name is Jason Todd, but you can just call me Jason. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Setu and Miyako's jaws dropped as they stared at his face, while AI's sparkling eyes never strayed from him the instant he stepped into the room. It's nice to meet you, Jason-san, AI greeted with a bright smile. I didn't properly introduce myself before because of the circumstances we were in, but I'm AI Hoshino. She gestured to the president and his wife. You've already met the president. And the woman standing next to him is his wife, Miyako-san. Damn. Seta muttered as he and Miyako picked their jaws up from the floor and shook themselves awake from their daze. Miyako bowed, a hint of red dusting her cheeks. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jason-san. My husband and I are incredibly grateful for you saving AI. If there's anything we can do for you, please don't be afraid to ask. That's right. Seta said, bowing like Miyako. I've taken care of AI for years and she's practically my adoptive daughter. You don't know how thankful I am. Seta knew that if AI had died, it would have felt like he lost his own daughter, and everything they built would crumble like sand. Please, there's no need to bow, Jason said. Although I appreciate the gesture, it's too much. I don't deserve it. If he was faster or if he picked the right area to search first, AI wouldn't have to be in this situation in the first place. In the end, he was almost too late to save her due to his mistake, like how Batman was too late to save him. He'll do everything he can to never make that same mistake again. Jason-san, AI called, making them turn to her. You saved my life and there's nothing I can do to repay such an act. You've allowed me to continue to take care of my children when I thought there was no more hope for such a thing to happen anymore. For that, not even everything I own will be enough to repay you. So please, there is anything at all that we can do. Jason sighed. At this point, we're just going in complete circles. Might as well fulfill their wishes, then. Okay, Jason nodded to their wishes and anticipation filled them. If you really want to repay me, you can start by eating this first. He gestured to the raised bag of food and drinks. Before anyone else could say anything, Ruby started jumping. Oh, what do you have? What do you have? Well, I asked Seta-san what type of food I wasn't allowed to bring, so I bought these instead. Jason placed the bag on a nearby table and started taking out what was inside. He brought out sushi, canned drinks, bottled water, sandwiches, and fresh fruits. He handed Ruby the pack of sushi while Aqua requested a bottle of water and a sandwich. They began eating in the chairs next to AI's bed. Wait, Seta stuttered in surprise at how much food there was. I thought you were gonna just buy a few bags of chips or a couple of fruits. I bought a lot since I didn't know what you all liked. You can keep whatever is left over, though. I have enough food for myself, and Hoshino-sa. AI. Jason blinked in surprise and turned his head to AI, who was currently smiling as she pat the head of Aqua. In your country, you call each other by your first names, right? You can do the same with me. It's fine. It seemed like this was one of her wishes. Jason hesitantly nodded. Okay, AISA. AI shook her head again and enunciated her name. Nope. Just AI. AI-san, I can't just. Nope. One more time. AI. Everyone else looked back and forth between Jason and AI's banter with tilted heads, wondering what was going on. In the end, Jason lost the battle of wills and gave up, giving in to her request. Jason slowly spoke her name, AI. He paused until AI nodded happily before continuing. We'll need to eat quite a bit to help her body heal and recover. You will also need to sleep a lot, AI. Jason checked once more to see if she was actually fine with letting him call her with her first name, which wasn't normal in Japan unless you were married or if you were given permission. And even then, you would need to add a suffix such as sen for normal and business relationships or chen for close female friends. AI continued nodding happily before she got an idea. Is it fine if I just call you Jason? Her pronunciation's a bit off, but it's not bad. Jason shrugged. Go ahead. Though won't your fans raise torches and pitchforks if they heard you call a guy using just their first name? Oh, so you do know I'm an idol. AI playfully tilted her head and grinned. And to answer your question, not if they don't find out. Well. The president nervously interjected, I'm fine with that as long as you keep it in private settings. If the media found out, your career will be in jeopardy. Don't worry, President. AI gave a thumbs up with her signature smile. AI Hoshino will handle it, no sweat. The president just chuckled nervously. At least she doesn't seem to be dwelling on what happened with that stalker. Speaking of, he tapped Jason on the shoulder and signaled to talk outside. AI's curious gaze followed them as they walked outside. Seta donned a serious look as he leaned on the wall. Jason-san, Aqua told me about how you were investigating how the stalker found AI's address. Have you found any clues? Jason nodded to Seta's question. I asked him and he said that during a handshake event, a man wearing a cap, thick sunglasses, and a mask handed him a letter containing AI's address. Said that the only thing he knew was that the man was of average height and had blonde hair. Aside from that, I found nothing else that could lead us to whoever the suspect is. Seta pondered to himself. What if I told you I had a clue as to who leaked her address? You do. Yeah, but. Seta sighed. Look, you saved AI's life and I'm incredibly grateful for that, but this is incredibly sensitive info. It's the father, isn't it? Setu almost choked on his saliva. How'd you figure it out? I guessed, and you just confirmed it, Jason shrugged. Damn it. Seta scratched his head in annoyance. Yeah, it's probably that ex of hers. I don't know who he is, though. She's incredibly tight-lipped about that subject, and no matter how I try to get the information out of her, she won't budge. Have you tried asking her after the incident? It's likely not that hard to deduce that the only people who knew her address are the only ones who could have leaked it, and I don't think you're the kind of man who would do that, Seta-san. Thanks, but I don't think it's a good topic to approach as of now. I'll try asking her after she recovers. Seta holds the handle of the door, preparing to open it. I know it's presumptuous of me to ask this, but is it fine if I ask that you keep investigating this? There might be things I don't know about that you can find out. We'll pay you twice as much as you ask for in America. Jason shook his head. No need. I have enough money to live well for the rest of my life. But what I need is a lead. Do you know where AI might have met her ex? Said frowned thoughtfully before answering. I think she might have met him when she was a part of the Lalali theatrical company. She trained there before she became famous, and it was after she left the group that she told me she became pregnant. Alright. Thanks for the info. I'll see what I can find. For now, I think we should head back. It might be chaos in there already. Heh, you might be right. Thanks again, Jason-san. No problem. They all spent a good while conversing, with Jason answering their questions with false stories or half-truths, until the kids fell asleep and visiting hours were over. Before Jason said his farewells, AI, through pure persistence, made him promise that he'd visit her at least every other day. He found it to be slightly out of left field, but it wasn't something he was reluctant to do, and he might get to know her ex's identity during one of their conversations. Late at night. From the top of a skyscraper, Jason looked down at the city while eating a large hamburger. So, what are you gonna do now? Finishing the drug ring? Jason shook his head. I'll take a break. Need to set up some networks and backdoors. I'm moving into the condo next to AI's as well. Aside from that, I'm trying to design some better suits in my head. Joe did say that I'll need to be stronger to beat whatever he'll throw me at, but if I can't get stronger quickly, I'll need to up my technological advantage. I have the combined skills, knowledge, and experience of 8 of my world's best martial artists, who were also the pinnacles of the human potential. I'm pretty sure I can come up with something that'll beat most suits Bruce has ever made. Jason was sure there was something else to Joe's upgrade, though. He wouldn't make such a big deal out of it if it didn't offer more, aside from their skills, knowledge, and experience. Maybe it was also his potential? He'll have to test it out to be sure. From his assessment of his condition during the fight with the phantoms, he could tell that were big changes in his body. Practically no delay between his mind's commands and his muscles, which allows him to react far faster and move better than even Deathstroke could. Control over every cell in his body, a mind that was like a supercomputer, and so much more. There's a lot I need to do.